And one thing I found interesting is the way he talked about his practice of history. And to me, it really lines up with some of the things that Tolkien has to say about fairy stories and fantasy in the essay on fairy stories. So you might be familiar, but probably not, with this word Morifok. Can you guys see that?
No, I'm not. Yeah, I can
Okay.
see it.
Morifok. I don't think there's an official pronunciation of that. So I'm going to read a little bit of this essay and then I'll talk about it. Just Morifok or Morifok is a fantastic word, but it could be seen written up in every town in this land. It is coffee room viewed from the inside through a glass door. It was seen by Dickens on a dark London day, and it was used by Chesterton to denote the queerness of things that have become trite when they are seen suddenly from a new angle. The word Morifok may cause you to suddenly realize that England is an utterly alien land, lost either in some remote past age, glimpsed by history, or in some strange dim future to be reached only by a time machine. To see the amazing oddity and interest of its inhabitants in their customs and feeding habits. But it cannot do more than that, act as a time telescope focused on one spot. Creative fantasy, because it is mainly trying to do something else, make something new, may open your hoard and let all the locked things fly away like caged birds. And I think what Illich was doing with his more historical pieces, and from what I've heard him discuss in interviews, is he talks about this. He wanted to take his students back to another time, and they were typically reading in the original language of the things they were working, so often in Latin or in French or in Italian, to another time in another language, to get that sense that things are incredibly odd, or the queerness of things that have otherwise become trite. Like our everyday life seems the normal one until you understand even a sliver of history, a time that's nothing like our own. And then everything looks different because all of a sudden it doesn't feel as essential or necessary. Tolkien later in the essay talks about one of the things he loves about fantasy, or the things that he believed that fantasy does, is because it creates the secondary world that's different from the primary world we live in. It can leave behind the things of the primary world that we all hate, which puts light on the things. And that's why so many of his stories resonate. Is he talks about lamps. He's like, electric lamps are so annoying and stupid, but in the fantasy world, they're not a necessary part of the environment. So you can go back to appreciating a tree is kind of the example. And I think this historical view in Illich, like it is, and this is sort of my thesis, not his, but it's going to be a thing that I take seriously in the course, is looking back at these moments in history for him, the 12th century, and what was going on with books and literacy and letters in the 12th century, is a way for us to step out of our moment in time and then start working through creative fantasies and thinking toward secondary realities that could someday become our primary reality. Right. So instead of like Tolkien, fantasy becomes this sort of, which a lot of like crappy fantasy is just awful, really uncomfortable medievalism. I don't think Tolkien is that at all, but like that is what it kind of becomes in a lot of ways. But like this is also a maneuver that is totally valuable in thinking toward futures, possibly too. And I think Illich is someone who gives us tools to work with to step out of what we take as automatic and normal and everyday and inescapable, and recognize like even the way we treat a book, which is the topic of the fourth book on the list, is very unique to our time. And actually, it's that particular approach to book, our approach to books is dying. And so to understand the way it's dying is we have to go back and understand the way it was born, is kind of his thesis in the vineyard of the text. And it's fascinating. So
I didn't know you've been getting really into Tolkien, but I guess it does make sense. He was in your piece in Underground Theory, actually, right? You had mentioned the dancing pattering of Tom Bombadil's feet, still, I forget exactly how you said it, but yeah, it was beautiful.
I don't either. And Gandalf's 17-year study that the movies just get oh so wrong.
Exactly.
Yeah, I'm just about done again with the Return of the King. It's really sad.
You're reading it?
Yeah. In the evening.
Yeah. Cool. Well, we still have a half hour left, and I
have 15 minutes. Or are we on till 4:30?
Oh, we're on till 4:30, but you don't have to be here till 4:30.
Yeah. Ideally 4:50. I'm riding my bike home.
All right. Well, to the people who are joining now on this new live stream, welcome back, everybody. This part 3 in the stream will just start in the middle of Bryan talking about whatever he was talking about when you joined at the beginning, for the people watching this in the future. But everybody who's listening to this on podcast, you're just annoyed that I keep interjecting this stuff about the stream. And look, it's almost seamless when I can do both at the same time. But as soon as the stream goes to shit, it's like, well, man, how annoying. But anyway, all right. So where are we at? I guess, Nancy, you have a better sense for where we've been and where this is or what do you?
I do think before we got back recording and streaming and all that, you had just got to the point where Illich says essentially waste will either be seen as a curse or freedom or something. If you want, I think that'd be interesting to go into, because I think I want to defend my right to be wasteful from the perspective of capital or our overlords or whatever, to be economically unproductive. I think that's something important to hang on to. I think that's something that can help us define our demands for the future.
So I was talking about this quote from Shadow Work, which is one of the later books of essays. But he's talking about unemployment and just the different ways of approaching the question of unemployment, but how we approach the question says a lot about a society. The choice for or against the notion of man as a growth addict decides whether unemployment, that is, the effective liberty to work free from wages and or salary, shall be viewed as sad and a curse, or as useful and a right. And so that must be right where we got interrupted. He did write a whole book that we won't read in the course, but is because the topics get covered elsewhere, but it's called The Right to Useful Unemployment. And it is kind of making this larger argument that human free autonomous time is basic, like it is what matters. Like we've convinced ourselves that like we need to have control over everyone's time in a society or in the world in general, and development initiatives in the third world are basically initiatives to get control over other people's times and there is no value for unstructured, undetermined time in which you use to fulfill whatever projects it are that are meaningful to you. And I think it's just like, it's a sticky point in the work, because I think, this invites questions of what about lazy people and things like that. But a generous reading, at least at first, because lazy people exist. I'll grant that. It's a real thing. But I think the refreshing thing in Illich's work is there's like just a really fundamental belief that people care about their lives, which is crazy that's like an outlandish view, but like it's just like, yeah, I think people care about their life and having a decent one. I think that's just inherent to like most people. And so, yeah, occasionally there be people who just kind of squander it, whatever. Like for the most part, if you give them the opportunity, people will do what they need.
I think
not everyone's going to be an intellectual. Not everyone's going to like do the things we do, but like they're going to be sitting doing their thing, thinking we should be doing it, right? And it's just like, I think that's a refreshing view to me, because not many people hold it. Not as like, a core value or belief.
Yeah, I think it's definitely fair to imagine that, given, like you said, given the opportunity and the resources, the tools, the support, all these things, people will want to lift themselves up out of whatever slop they find themselves in. And then, yeah, I mean, there's always going to be lazy people, whatever, but it won't. I do think those will be the outliers. It's interesting that time is, I don't know, the metric of the machine that is kind of running the show. If you are taking your time and doing what you want to do for yourself, then you're being wasteful, and you've been cursed. And that's another one of the threads that has been going kind of throughout the day. And I just find that interesting. I mean, maybe if you want to real quick touch on, I guess, Illich's vision of education, maybe where it was and what happened to it, and what he tried to do with his experiments. I mean, if you got, what, 10 minutes left?
Yeah. Maybe I'll just kind of go through a couple, I think, teasers that he lays in the introduction of Deschooling Society. So ultimately, at ground level, Illich believes that people are fundamentally curious, and they are gonna, like we were just talking about, they're gonna, basically every person is gonna want to do for their life what matters. And that we naturally are curious and pursue learning opportunities for whatever it is that we're interested in. We're pretty good at finding other people who are interested in what we're interested in, and making learning happen. And so what he's doing in Deschooling Society and in his other works is there's kind of this double relation with institutions and tools. Our attitudes and views shape what tools we have in our society, what we deem as important. But the reverse direction is something he's really keen to point out, is the way that the tools tend to undermine the things that they were initially created for. And school is the prime example. And so, the idea of the book is basically, he's I'm not out here to be after schools and schools alone, but if you can see this at work in school as an institution, you can see it across the institutional spectrum. And so if a school was created for the purpose of education, is kind of what we would all respond in some manner or another. He writes, this is in the introduction, so this gives a taste, and this is definitely a polemical work, so you get a flavor of it here too. Universal education through schooling is not feasible. It would be no more feasible if it were attempted by means of alternative institutions built on the style of present schools. Neither new attitudes of teachers toward their pupils, nor the proliferation of educational hardware or software in classroom or bedroom, nor finally the attempt to expand the pedagogue's responsibility until it engulfs his pupils' lifetimes, will deliver universal education. The point being that you're never going to capture everybody and universally get everyone to the same point. And then the rest of the book is going to explore ways that in fact it undermines it. Right. You can see when you look at data too, especially the decrease in the number of people who read as adults, and ultimately what education is going to become is just the institution of schools themselves is going to become a sorting system. Which is investigated at length in the book, but it becomes a sorting system for people who are willing to play by the rules, and maybe they are intelligent at some level, but they're also playing by the rules to advance through the system. And anybody who's left behind, then education has just been this commodity that they have not achieved, or they have not gotten. rather than the natural, intrinsic, organic learning that all, like, I've got a 2-year-old, you've got kids, like, kids just like, what's this? And adults do that too. We're just kind of trained out of thinking it's important or that it matters. Because if it's not attached to some licensure or diploma at the end of a process or something like that, it has no political or social validity. To the extent that he, like, one of his recommendations is, it's an extreme one in the book, but I'm like, is it that extreme? But people treat it like it is that employers should not be, like, there should be laws banning employers from asking about your education. Basically, like, you can't ask for a high school, college, diplomas or anything, because all that tells you is that a person is capable of getting through high school, not what they know. And so that's going to be like kind of the bouncing off point in deschooling, but it just kind of, once you understand the larger pieces that he's doing there, the other books really kind of come into play too, or into focus. Where are we at? 5 minutes.
Excellent. Good work. I actually, I do have a question, but I know you're probably about to say something, so I'll let you say it. But well, I just want to, you maybe you could kind of re-invite the audience to this course. Of course, for people who might have already heard it because the stream's been in and out and stuff like that, repetition's fine. Okay, first of all, but also maybe because I want to hear a little bit more about how your approach to teaching this course in June, July, how it has developed over the last couple of months as you've prepared.
That's what I was getting ready to get to anyway, because I figured that's a natural, good closing point. The thing I want to say is, like, I don't think this is necessarily a course for everybody, but I do want to invite fellow travelers who take, like, the ideas that we've been talking about in this hour, like, are concerned about the things that we've been concerned about or found things interesting. Join us, right? Join us, please. This will be different than the Nick Land course. As I develop it, the Nick Land course was presented as, like, you don't need to do any of the reading. Everything is suggested. And I didn't do any of the reading, and I took liberty not to, and I'm glad I didn't. But my pitch is that I would like everybody who joins the course to do the readings in the course. Obviously, there's no police, do what you're going to do. But, like, I mean that too, like, come prepared to do the readings and be a reader on the journey. I think it will pay off in the end. Even if you don't think of yourself as someone who reads a ton right now, these are not hard books. They're challenging to pin down what he's really getting at, but the language itself is super readable. There are 4 books. We're going to read 1 book a week. Each book is 120 pages or so. And only one is bigger than that. It's 125. That means it's a 3 to 4 hour read for your average reader. Okay. So it's, like, not a huge time commitment. But I'm thinking this as, like, a course rather than a class. To me, a class has, like, connotations of, like, you're just going to be taught a bunch of material, whereas a course connotes a path or a way. And this is the path through Illich's thought. And we're going to be on the course together. And I just take my job to be the sort of the leader of the trek down the path, right? So that hopefully by the time we get to In the Vineyard of the Text, which I think is his most mature work, his most complicated work, his most academic work, but his most fruitful work, that prior reading will all kind of, like, contextualize what's really happening there. And you can see the moves that he's been doing. And also, by the time we're at that book, he's probing what a reader is. And so, having gone through the process of being the reader, if you're not already, but I'm assuming if you're in an audience here, you probably already are a reader. As readers, he's the books to us and was to himself in a certain sense. It's a critical engagement with what it is that we do. And it's uncomfortable, but it's more uncomfortable if you're doing the reading in a productive way, because he's going to question bookishness. And I'm bookish. I read a lot. But that's also connected to institutional values, and he reveals that. And so I think it's been great, and we're gonna do it in 4 weeks. And what else did I miss that I think that covers it? A lot. The other stuff is still in, like, I'm still working it out because only so much can be done in 4 weeks. We will not cover everything he ever wrote.
So you just said that he questions books and that they are sort of like, there's a bookishness kind of comes with this idea of institutions. But you also say in the quote that I actually have up on the screen, the speech bubble coming out from you, says Illich is not the anti-school lunatic people take him to be, but instead revolutionizes how we think about and use our tools. And I remember we had a conversation about this. I almost used the word institutions there because you were saying institutions are tools for him. And so so bookishness has something to do with institutions. Yeah, but what's the problem with that? He doesn't have a problem with institutions, right?
No, he's just trying to elucidate more clearly what our relationship is and how this goes back to, like, the farther in life he got, the more sort of like he started to see this systemic issue and how everything's so interrelated. And so he says in Tools of Conviviality that the book is like one of the convivial tools par excellence. Convivial meaning is like he's endorsing it because it is a massively available, like, underground theory could be printed by you, received within weeks, and distributed immediately. That is an amazing thing that you don't rely on massive overhead to make happen. And that's been a great thing about the book. But the book is also to, like, think of, like, Ill's term technique. The technique of reading and the technique of printing changed our relationship to information to where it became based on production, growth, and centered those values, because now you can say, I read this book and I crossed it off my list. And so it shifts the way we think about reading, whereas the monkish reading that he's at the center of this change is a reading and rumination over long periods of time on incredibly short texts, whereas bookish people, we blow through texts. Like, I forget the exact text number, but at one point Illich was in the hospital, and this is why I say it's self-critique. At some point he was in a hospital. I forget what the occurrence was. He had nothing else to do, and he had a list. He's like, these are the 30 books I'm going to read in the next 2 days, kind of thing. Like, he thought the way we do about books. But that doesn't mean that we shouldn't be really aware of what our reading practice is, how that transfers into our whole, like, practice of living in the world. So
excellent. Check out the course, everybody. Introduction to Ivan Illich, Reimagining Tools and Society. It's going to be on Thursdays at 8 a.m. Pacific time, 11 a.m. Eastern time. This might be the first course that we've done that is in the AM for the Eastern side of the country. And then 1700 CET. And it's going to be June 13th, 20th, 27th, and July 4th, because we don't give a fuck.
Oh,
that's
fuck
right.
All that shit.
Yeah. You'll never ever see me do something on Christmas Day. You'll never ever see me do something on Christmas Day. You might see me do something a couple days before. You'll probably see me do stuff on Halloween. 4th of July, absolutely. You know, some things have to remain sacred, but you know what? Freedom.
Not that shit.
No, man. There's no better way to be independent than to be independent from Independence Day, right?
There we go.
The true Americans. Read Ivan Illich and talk about him in Bryan's course at Theory Underground. Well, thank you so much for joining us and for speaking through all of the distractions. I mean, it's clear that you teach children where you wouldn't have been able to do that. So thank you.
You betcha. Adios.
Adios,
Peace out, man.
amigo.
Thank you.
Take care.
Thinking
Yeah,
is
see
super
you guys. Have
uncool,
fun.
and that's why you should do it. It's just like almost anything that's like cool anymore. Yeah, it just sucks. And I think that's like what the underground movement has always been about, is just like seeing what's in the mainstream, being like it ain't there, and kind of like cobbling something together, you know? And yeah, it's a little mismatched, but that's like its beauty.
We cannot do direct revolution, but the only way to lay the foundation for it is to do what you are doing to move the underground. It's a theoretically correct title.
Welcome to Theory Underground, where workers with earbuds can find genuine liberation from necessity.
Research at Theory Underground focuses on what is most important for understanding our current situation: theory of the subject, capital, time-energy theory, critical media theory, CMT, and the most essential critiques necessary for understanding why the theory, ideology, and common sense of influencers left to right misses the mark.
We bring primary texts from leading lights of diverse fields to bear on topical issues and works popular in our current world. Theory Underground is a publishing house as well as lecture course and social media platform.
You've been reading Underground Theory.
Yes.
And
amazing book. I'm a publisher and an editor. I run and review books. Literally, it's my living. This is the best edited collection I've ever read.
Jesus Christ.
This is a little experiment in what I, David McCarricker, can pull off without relying on the academy or the algorithmic dictates of the attention economy.
Usually, a good edited collection has good essays, but you only want to read a few. Every essay makes me want to read the other essays because you have a vision. Everyone that you invited for a reason. You weren't some fake publicist who's like, how's so-and-so's a new book? Have them on your show. No, you only talk to people because you've read shit by them that you've thought about, that you think has value, even if you disagree. So I think that's what's amazing.
I believe that I am, like so many others, pioneering a future in which educators can form learning webs that will make learning as a way of life enjoyable and emancipatory. However, before these tools become accessible, they have to be experimented with. That's why I built my own website and app using nothing more than my own saved wages, 5 patrons, and some small classes of students over the last year. Of course, I also have had my wife Anne's moral support and help with accounting so that I don't get in trouble with the IRS or whatever. In less than a year, Theory Underground has already put out 8 courses, 2 books, one, my book, Time Energy, and the other, Underground Theory, which has over 30 contributors, including works written by students at Theory Underground, some of my fellow travelers, and colleagues in the broader universe of Underground Theory. Beyond the books and courses, though, you will also find interviews, reading exegetical reaction sessions, and live weekly events for working class autodidacts, independent researchers, and renegade academics. These include a variety of clubs and cohorts that meet on a weekly or monthly basis. If you want to get involved, there are 4 main subscription levels.
Think of it like a gym membership, but for your mind.
The point is to make learning, practice, and theoretical comprehension a way of life. Support at this stage of the operation is more crucial than ever because my savings were used up over the last year of getting this established. If I can triple my subscribers in the next 2 months, I can quit my gig at Amazon and focus on this work full time. All I need is a few more people at each of the levels or a couple big time patrons who just want to see it happen. Right now I am doing a patron and site subscriber drive, so excuse the commercial. But if you end up really liking what goes on at this channel, consider signing up soon. If you cannot afford it, but want to get involved with some of the stuff behind the paywall, I have made a financial aid scholarship you can sign up for here in the description. Quick side note, some people ask about the profit motive. At this point, I have not actually made a return on any of my investment in terms of the amount of time, energy that I put into things, the amount of savings I've actually put into things, the opportunity cost of the work that I'm doing as opposed to the other kinds of things that I could be doing for money. But more importantly, I don't actually make enough to pay for my cost of living. The goal is to make enough for my cost of living, and then once that is achieved, everything over that amount is going to go towards expanding the operation to the point where I can hire Michael Downs, aka Mikey of The Dangerous Maybe, to be a full-time researcher and part-time teacher at Theory Underground. All right, so with that aside, I just want to say also, if you are a worker with earbuds, what's up? I see you. I work at Amazon part-time, and everything I do is for my past self, who used to work there full-time. Most workers with earbuds couldn't care less about theory, but I do believe a working class intellectual revolution could grow out of the underground theory scene. My hope is that what I have built here will contribute to making the scene something more than just a scene, and you into something more than just a scene kid. We're trying to make this into a real intellectual milieu capable of leading a way forward beyond the imminent crises facing humanity. But for that, we need thinking now more than ever.
Start thinking.
I hope that you either will or have enjoyed the program, and also make sure to like, comment, subscribe, and leave this playing in the background all the time while you're doing other things.
Playing long-form Theory Underground content in the background while you do things has, in the near future, been scientifically proven to emancipate minds from the functional illiteracy imposed on workers by the structural stultification of time energy. This is achieved by reterritorializing circumspective concern.
Also, to some degree, it is for the algorithm.
Think of it like a gym membership, but for your mind!
I love you so much.
I love you too.
What's up, everybody? We're back. Say hi to Mikey. Mikey, hi. What's up? Mikey No Neck. Welcome.
What's up?
Not a lot, man.
Hey,
Just
it's Mikey No Neck. Hey, look at this fucking guy.
Hey, this guy.
hey, this
it's New York
fucking
Pet.
guy.
Nobody will have any idea what we're talking about.
It's funny on its own. I'm convinced, but wasn't that the Italian? It was Italian food, right?
Last time I was like, Pat, I do have a neck.
Yeah. Oh, you showed him.
He's like, hey, don't spoil my fun.
Is that what he said?
Oh, you're a vegan? Here's a plate of butter.
Is that what he said? He said some shit like that to Anne, right?
Yeah, dude. He was like, oh, don't you worry that, sweetheart. I got you covered. You're a vegan. I'll give you a whole bowl of butter. I'm like, dude, it doesn't work that way.
That's not how it works, my friend.
All right, for context, so when Dave and Nance and Ann were in town for the tour, I took them to my favorite Italian restaurant, Casconi's, and there's this old New York guy, Italian guy, works there, Pat, and everybody calls him New York Pat. And he's this old. You could see him in like he could have easily been in a Martin Scorsese film, where he's the guy at the restaurant who just cracks jokes all night and breaks balls and everything, and he's everybody's favorite waiter. And I've been going there since I was a kid, and so when they were in town, I'm like, okay, I got to take him to Casconi's to meet New York Pat, and so they had it was a lot of fun. But that's who we're referencing here.
It's funny. Philip's in the chat. What's up, Philip? Good to see you, man. And he says Casconi's Pat, legend. Absolutely. Yeah, we all got to eat there with Philip and his girlfriend. It was fucking good times. Todd's entering the chat right now. Welcome, Todd. How you doing?
Hey, David. Great to see you.
Normally we're behind the scenes, rolling some PSA, but this is some weird special situation, and we are live right now, but we're not recording yet. So we'll start recording in a second.
Okay.
Do you have any questions? Any questions for the good of the order before we start the recording?
No, I'm good.
No?
I'm good.
All right. Let me just change a couple things around here so people can see you. All right. There we go. Boom. Yeah, we had some weird technical difficulties, lost 2/3 of our audience, and and also like this was all going to be in 2 streams, but now it's broken up into 3 streams, which is a real bummer because it was all going to fit together so nicely. But it doesn't matter because these are all getting published after the fact as a podcast, as podcast episodes,
Right.
and YouTube videos and everything. So it's fine.
Maybe it was just I came on and then the audience went down. I think that's probably. I would tune out when I came on. So that would be my.
Todd, it's not. It's the demon lemurs.
No. I think that I'm the only one that has no investment in any conspiracy theories about the deep state. So that's why I'm the one that is the victim of this thing. Like Doug Lane or these people that really believe in that crap. Like they're the ones they don't get it. No problem for them. But it's me who gets the thing. So that's what I get for my fidelity.
It was during Doug Lane when the lemurs attacked.
So I'm sure he loved that. Actually, that was probably warmed the cockles of his heart.
He was talking about the. Yeah, I'm not going to say anything. No, we don't want to.
No, it's good. Yeah. I know he's all into that.
Yeah, man.
I think he's going to pull my book from his series. Like he's going to retract the publication of it.
No, he likes your theory of the left too much, where the left is essentially that which does not have an enemy in principle.
Yeah, but sorry, I'm a statist, man, and he is not a statist. I'm an utter statist. So
no, he's a liberal statist.
Listen to his thing. He's an anarchist, man. He's an anarchist. I mean, I'm just calling it what it is. That's fine. I mean, I have friends that are anarchists. I consider Doug my friend. I have a little series of email things, and you go in the friend thing, Mikey goes in there, and Doug goes in the friend thing. So he's a friend of mine. Good. He's just an anarchist. I mean, it's fine.
It's fine. Just be yourself. Be yourself.
He probably thinks I'm some kind of Stalinist or, FBI stooge or something. That's,
You probably do a lot of Fed posting by his standards, but I'll have to ask him direct, Okay, with that said, we're ready to get this thing going. I'm going to go ahead and count down and we'll start it off. All right. So 3, 2, 1. All right, everybody. Welcome back to Theory Underground. I'm your host, David McCarricker. This time we've got 2 co-hosts and a guest, or is it one co-host, Nance, and then we got 2 guests, it's Mikey and Todd. I can't even tell at this point. Welcome, everybody. How you all doing?
I'm good. How are you? It's great to see you, David, and Nance and Mikey, everybody.
Yeah,
feeling fantastic. I've been going hard since 3 a.m. drinking decaf coffee, and I just couldn't be happier.
It's impressive, man. I've been dipping in. It's really you seem your energy level has stayed pretty constant, so it's pretty good.
Yeah, and for the people listening who are listening to this outside of the context of the stream, this has been going on, as I said, all day. But it's this, I don't know, what do we call it? Epic marathon broadcast, right? And I think I was energy-wise totally fine, and I was lucid and sharp, and I was able to stay on top of everything. But the moment that internet problem happened and I had to start the third stream and resend everything out to socials and stuff, it's like I got broken. So I'm going to kind of hand the reins off here to Mikey. I'm going to go refill my water bottle. I'm listening, but so good to have you here, Todd. We're going to dive into Mikey's questions first, then I'll bring in my questions.
Okay, cool.
That's if I allow you to have any time left for your questions. Okay, Todd. So what I kind of wanted to go over. So this summer, you're teaching a course on Seminar 11 with us at Theory Underground. We're all psyched. Have we decided, is it 4 or 5 weeks?
I thought it was 4, but whatever.
Whatever.
Doesn't matter.
Yeah, because I'm looking at Seminar.
It is 4.
Say what?
It is 4, but I just want to say that, we could we'll milk whatever we can get out of you, so.
So, there's 5 main sections, though. Unconscious and repetition, of the gaze as objet petit a, the transference and the drive, the field of the other and back to the transference. Wait. Oh, no, there's 4. And because there's the to conclude, and that's one session. Right. Okay, so basically, I listened to the new episode of Why Theory, where you guys are talking about Kant. You're getting into critique of pure reason. I saw your new video on the gaze, and I'm really happy because you already did a video on the gaze.
Yeah.
And it was more cinema focused.
Yeah.
And like this new one really unlocked. I've told you before, like gaze is this concept of Lacan's. I think it might be the one that's been the trickiest for me to get.
It's very hard, I think. I
Yeah.
mean, I had some students, so I did it because I'm teaching just a kind of half a class this semester, and I wanted to we wanted to go over the gaze of the concept, and I cannot assign my own text, my own writing, and I couldn't find a piece of writing that went through just Lacan's own examples in a system. Lacan you can't assign because that's that would be impossible. I mean, you could assign it in a whole class on Lacan, but you can't just do it in a week. So I spent the whole weekend making up that video, and just because of that, just because I thought there was this lacuna, and then I thought that the other video I have on it, I looked at it briefly to the extent that I can even look at myself, and I found it very dissatisfying, and it was so cinema focused, and the examples played on too long, and I wanted someone to talk about ambassadors, Petitjean, and Las Meninas, and so I did that.
No, and those examples, it's the first time, like in this, I mean, you do a lot in that video that clarified a lot, but it's the first time I feel like I have any idea of what the hell is going on with the fucking sardine can. Because Lacanians, this is one of these areas where your typical hyper intellectual Lacanian is not going to clarify anything on this. And in fact, they're probably going to make it more confusing.
Well, it's interesting because there's I'm not going to say the person's name, but there's a really famous person that takes Petitjean's word when he goes, "Do you see that can? It doesn't see you." And this person kind of goes off on that and says, but then Lacan corrects him and goes, "But all the same, it did see me," right? So that there's a whole line of, and this is an important reading of the gaze that gets misdirected because they take Petitjean's word and not Lacan's corrective of that. So I think that you're right. Like there's that little apologue has been really, I think, not delved into, and it doesn't. I think you're right. Like ambassadors sort of makes immediate sense, right? So in my class, I had, because the students didn't want to do it. They're like, "Oh yeah, we see the skull." I'm like, "No, you come up to the front, you look right down the line of the painting, and I want you to see it." And one of them goes, "I got it." I said, "No, you didn't." I said, "Get right onto because you have to really look right. You have to be right in line with the thing and looking down." I once was teaching at Loyola Marymount University, and there was an administrative assistant there, and she's like, "What is the deal with this painting? What's this thing?" I said, "Come here, I'll show it to you." And it literally took 15 minutes. I'm like, "Now get really," and she just couldn't. She couldn't. "I don't see it." She's like, "I don't see it. I don't see it." So finally, she saw it, and it was such a great. And this is why I think it's such a great example. This great moment where she's like, "Oh my God!" It was just this really transformative thing. So that painting, I think, makes sense to people. But the sardine can, I just don't think it's maybe not even a great example on Lacan's part, right? Because it doesn't make this immediate sense, and it has to do with human waste and the productive process, and it's even a sort of a critique of it's a critique of himself, which I like about it, and it's a critique of the capitalist process of production too. So it's very interesting, but it's not intuitive in the way I think ambassadors and even Las Meninas to another extent is.
Yeah, and so for context for everybody watching, the reason I want to kind of focus in on gaze right now is, like I said, Todd's going to be teaching this course coming up this summer on Seminar 11. This is, I think most Lacanians would agree, the fundamental teaching of Lacan. He goes back to basics, and he's laying out the 4 fundamental concepts. When it comes time for the course, I mean, we can have a discussion.
It is the text. It's the text.
Yes.
There's not even a close second, really.
But do you like, part of it is what's interesting. So there's the 4 fundamental concepts, and yet gaze as objet is stuck right there in the middle.
Yeah.
Almost this 5th key concept in the text.
Yeah.
And I guess like I do want to talk about gays. I kind of want to. I don't want to get lost on just the fundamental basics of it because you're going to go through those in the course. And I would recommend if you really want to follow what we're going to talk about for a minute, go watch Todd's new video. Todd, I will say, because I haven't checked. Do us a favor though. Don't take the original gays video down though. Like leave them both.
I won't. Yeah,
Okay.
I'll leave it up.
Because you do like it's almost where you watch the new one first and then you get a whole lot out of the older one.
Right. Maybe that's true. Yeah.
So
I mean, the filmic examples are different, right? So that's why, I mean, the other one's mostly on Vertigo, I think, and maybe a little bit on Citizen Kane. This one, the film
I really like
Silence
the from is it Drive?
Oh yeah, that's right. There's a Drive example.
Awesome.
Yeah.
The elevator.
Yeah, that's a great moment. Yeah.
So here's the thing, like, so because I've always struggled with this concept, and I feel like how your video on phallus really unlocked what the hell's really going on with it, where you can start to make sense of it in this broader sense of your life world or whatever. I feel like the new video on gays has done that for me, but I still kind of want to walk over some of the basics and then ask you some more questions that get into more detailed connections to other stuff with the gays. And so, first off, I mean, anybody, when you hear us talking about the gaze, you think it means somebody looking at you, the look, right? And what's confusing is that there is a way that this thing called gaze does, you feel like you're being looked at, right? But it's when you feel like you're being looked at by an object or some inanimate aspect of the visual field. And I've kind of had these uncanny experiences. I described it one time in, I think it was my Squid Game blog post, but I've gone for walks around my hometown, and it's always these moments where the for me at least, it's when the sun is creating a kind of sky that's phantasmatic. It's not your typical sunset. It's more sunset than your typical sunset. Everything seems serene. It's almost like my kind of decayed old suburb gleams again, and I feel like I've walked into some sort of fantasy of what the suburbs are. Now, the trick is, right, the objective field isn't actually becoming phantasmatic. I'm doing this by how I've already concocted a fantasy, that structures my desire of some, especially in some nostalgic way, of old school America suburbia, right? So the point is, when I'm out on these walks and this rare experience happens, I always like it's somewhere from a drain, some dark area, whether it's a drain or it's up in the trees that are the leaves are dark, but there's still sun out, right? There's always some dark spot. And it's this weird feeling that something's taking me into account. Something's looking at me, right? But the trick is, what's looking at me is actually my own desire externalized looking back at me. And so it's the me out there in my visual field looking back at me. And so it's a bizarre experience, right? And so that's why it works to call it the gaze, but we do not want to confuse it with another human subject or even an animal looking at us, right?
Right, exactly. Like I like this moment in Rear Window where, so a lot of times, Jimmy Stewart's looking across the thing. He sees a murder. He doesn't actually see it, but he concludes that a murder is taking place. And the Raymond Burr character there are moments where he looks right back at him and sees him, and that's not the gaze, right? But the moment where he's looking over there, the whole room's dark, and all you see is his cigarette going, as he's smoking it, it's bright and then dark. And then that's the moment, this guy, Miran Bozovic, has a great essay. It's in the Slavoi's Everything You Ever Want to Know About Lacan, but Afraid to Ask Hitchcock. It's in that collection. And he makes this point that's the moment of the gaze, right? So it's this moment Jimmy Stewart does feel seen, right, in that moment. And we as a spectator feel seen as well, because it's a film really about our voyeurism. and but you're right, it's not a direct seeing, right? It's more the way in which it's not someone else seeing us, it's the way in which our desire shapes what we see. And like Lacan's wager is that appears in what we see as an object, right? As a moment that doesn't fit within the rest of that phantasmatic structure. So like your example of this perfect suburban evening, it sounded very great, actually. It made me think of like walking around my hometown. But I think that like when you fantasize, it tends to hide that element, right? But then there'll be this moment where it shines, it comes through, where you're like, wait a minute, something's a little off in this fantasy. And then you realize, wait a minute, this is all here for me to look at. And I think usually the reason why it doesn't happen in art or film, I mean, it does in art and film and not in real life, is because we look in the real world and we say, oh, this is just all there, right? It's not like that. It's not constructed for us to look at. It's just there. But of course, that's not true, right? Like every building we walk into is made for us to look at, right? But we don't see that. We think, oh, there's just a building there, and they just put it up, and it's just there. And I think one of the great things about this concept, I think it's maybe Lacan at I might say this in that video, like his dialectical best, because it connects this objective thing with our own subjective position as someone looking at something, right? But I think your emphasis on this distinction between look and gaze is really, really important. So what you hear called the female gaze is really, I don't think it's a bad theory. I mean, I think there's something to it, clearly. Sorry, that was a funny slip. The male gaze. What you hear called that is I would call it the male look. And I think if Laura Mulvey, who's the famous theorist of this idea, if she had said the male look, that would have really helped to not create this confusion with Lacan. I mean, she did, to be fair, she wrote her essay, Visual Pleasure and Narrative Cinema, in 1974, which is a couple years before the Four Fundamental Concepts had even been published, and she would never have gone to it, and she didn't have access to the manuscript. So she's using the mirror stage essay as the basis for that conception of the gaze. And so the idea is that there's a mastery over the visual field. And then Lacan's point is the gaze is actually the mark of our non-mastery over that field. So the point at which all of a sudden we're like, wait a minute, I'm actually involved in this thing. I'm not separate and have mastery over it. And I think most of the time we like to think we have mastery over our visual field. Like, even though we didn't build the building, we walk in and we know what's what, and we can find our way about, and we're not endangered by unless you're, on the front in some war or something, you're not endangered by the thing that you're seeing. Instead, you're not involved in it. It's just distant. And I think the gaze collapses that distance, which is why it's so great. It's dialectical. And that's, in a certain way, all of Hegel's philosophy is about collapsing that distance between the subject and the object.
So a couple things come to mind. I mean, on the one hand, like, I guess this experience that I've had walking around, and again, like trying to kind of phenomenologically describe it, it is. It's when it's in the evening and the sun is lighting, shooting between the houses. You don't see the rot of this old suburbia, right? Everything for a moment, because it's almost like the lighting of the sun and the purple and the orange in the sky. Everything that's decayed gets somewhat concealed, and it's like I stepped into this fantasy space. And the weird thing is, I think these moments are kind of the fundamental grounding of a lot of religious experiences, because what you think initially is, it's like the objective world is making itself look the way I want it to look, like it's doing it. And it's almost like there's something transcendent beyond me that's actively producing this for me. The trick is to realize, no, I'm the one making this sublime. Like, it's my unconscious desire and my fantasy. Like, this is just the sun going down. But for me, because how I've painted suburbia in my mind, this just so happens to align itself to my unconscious fantasy frame, which structures my desire. And so it appears like objective reality, or you could call it God, is doing something for me when in fact I'm the one doing it. And that's the key dimension of this is gaze because we can start, if somebody goes, okay, be like analytic philosophers for a moment and start giving us these precise definitions of gaze. You and I both, we're going to give like 15 probably, because there's so many.
Right.
It's OJ Petit A. It's how desire transcendentally structures the empirical field. Like there's all these,
and how it curves the field of perception, right? Like it's that too. So I think you're right. Like we can give definitions till the cows come home, probably too many, right? Yeah.
And so I guess, okay, part of it is, and I know how you do, because if you bring in all the technical terms and you bring in every valence that belongs to you lose everybody. So what you've always been able to do is go, okay, like if I try to do all of this in one attempt, it just becomes verbiage. So the point though is the gaze is objet petit a in the visual field. What that means, objet petit a, is for Lacan, this is its key concept. And when we're children, at some point through a process of socialization, the idea of no takes hold in us. No, we can't do whatever we want, however we want, whenever we want. There are ways, protocols, etc. We have to conform to those to be a member of the social order, to society. And so we have to give up something in order to be a member of society. The trick is we don't really give up anything, at least not a physical part of ourselves. It's not material. But the point is, since we feel like we've made this fundamental sacrifice, from then on, our subjectivity is structured around this enduring, perpetual sense that we are lacking some fundamental aspect of ourselves. It's like we feel like some core chunk of our being has been chiseled away from us, and it's out there in the world. And ultimately, that's what desire is about. And it tries to find it in specific objects. It never finds it, because the point is this special object, this lost object, this missing object, is merely the reification and externalization of our own lack. It's just our lack, our sense of not being complete, externalized and objectified into what we take to be a missing object. Now, here's the trick, right? Like that's the basic way to talk about objet petit a as the object cause of desire. So for somebody who's not familiar with all this Lacanian terminology, the point is there are specific objects we desire. We all are familiar with this all too well. I want to live in that house. I want to date this person. I want to have this job, right? But the trick is what causes us idiosyncratically to desire the specific objects we desire. Well, this thing is called objet petit a. It's what causes us to desire the objects we desire. And so, but ultimately it's invisible. It doesn't weigh. It doesn't have weight. It's not material. It's just an ontological lack, externalized and reified. So here's the trick though. And this is kind of where this theory of gaze and how it shapes the perceptual field of vision in particular gets a little tricky, because Lacanians basically talk about objet a just as we each have an objet a, and that's it. The problem is we have 4 drives and each drive has its own objet a.
Right.
So my question to you, Todd, is like, okay, we understand that objet petit a as such emerges through this sense of no taking hold, and this sense that we've compromised ourselves or given up a portion of our being, etc. We've on the altar of society in order to be a member. But how do you think this works at the level? Like, how does gaze emerge from the eyes? Like, is it just symbolic castration, the prohibition of the no, that makes this happen to our eyes, where we start to structure? Like, I guess that's the what I to is what
I mean, I think that it's interesting because as Lacan developed, so it's in Seminar 21, Les Noms du Père, that he says the objet a is what I invented, right? Like he says that's my one thing. But by that time, you're right that, so from between seminars 11 and seminars 13, so this is like mid 1960s, he does say there's 4 drives and that there's 4 object on, and he says, so Freud has the anal and the oral drive, and I've added the oral, AURAL, and the visual drive, right? And thus I've added the gaze and the voice and the gaze, right? But then later it's interesting. So he kind of stops talking about that way of thinking about object, and he thinks about object in much more general terms. And so I guess my answer to you would be that he thinks that there's this that our desire is itself, and I think you're right that there is this moment of conformity, right? We have to adjust to the social demand, but even if we didn't have that, like even if you and I were wild, like Casper Hauser or whatever his name is, right? Like we still would have this distortion of our desire as long as we were speaking beings, and I think Lacan's idea is that affects every mode of perception. So it's like when I think hearing it's equally, maybe even more interesting, right? Because you think about the way my podcast partner Ryan Engley likes to, when he teaches class, he likes to play this group called the Cocteau Twins. Hopefully you're all too young to have heard of them, but they were the big band in the 90s, and their words are basically they're intentionally just, they are real words, but you look at the lyrics, and even if you look at the lyrics online, they're like, I think they're saying this, but it might be this, because they don't ever tell, right, what the lyrics are. So, but one of their song goes, life is like a cherry cola. So this is called something ice station. I forget the name of it. Anyway, it's their best song, but I can't believe I've forgotten the name. Anyway, but the point is, he plays that song in class, and he tells the students, write down what you hear. And they write, and no one ever, it's impossible. No one gets the lyrics right. But the way that they don't get them right, and this is the genius of this group, is it shows their desire, right? So that's how, and that's true about what we see too, right? Like we don't get it right. We don't see what's there because our desire slightly shapes. I mean, it's most obvious in, I was writing this, so I agreed to write this, Maury Rudy, who's my friend who just died, not actually, so close to a year ago now, asked me to write this Cambridge companion to Lacan with her, and then she died. I got stuck with it. Anyway, I just finished it, and one of the things as I was talking about, so how this works, right? How desire kind of shapes what we see. I thought of when you look at a book, like people will be looking at this bookshelf behind me, right? And they'll see like maybe one thing. They'll be like, what's that Marx on the top? I think there's Marx on, I don't know what's on there. On the top shelf, there's Kafka on the top shelf. Why are those unopened? I don't know. That's a scandal. But the point is, you see, you're drawn to certain things. My example is, say there's on a bookshelf like Jordan Peterson's, what is it, 7 Rules for Life or 12 Rules, I don't know what it is. And then Hegel's Phenomenology of Spirit. Like our eyes are instantly drawn to Hegel's Phenomenology of Spirit. We don't even see the Peterson book there unless there's a kind of perversion of our sense of things, right? So I think it's really simple to understand if you think of it that way, right? Like, why do certain things stand out? And I spoke of Maury Rudy. She's like, you go into a bar or wherever, right? Or a room, a bunch of people. And all of us, and you look around and you're like, I could fall for that person and that person. And the rest of these people are just, I could talk to them, but basically they're nothing to me. And I thought that was such a great point about the way desire works, right? Like it's not like you could fall in love with anyone. You know, there's a really, I mean, it's not like she believes in a soulmate, but she believes, and I think rightly, that it's a very, very small scope. And you couldn't even say what it is. Like and this is why I think all these match sites are a little bit off, right? Because you put a list of things you want in a person, but you were mentioning objet, like you can't put the objet on the list, right? Like it's the thing that doesn't fit in the list. So the very thing that would make you fall in love is the thing that gets the person excluded from your list of possibles, right? Or the swipes or whatever you're doing, right? So, I mean, it was maybe a little, it was worse when I was young and you had to meet people in the flesh, but it was a little better in this way because you had a little bit more opportunity to meet this objet aspect of a person. And now I think that's a little foreclosed, right? So anyway, so that's what I would say. It's like, it's a constant in every perceptual field. It's constantly reshaping it. And I don't think vision is privileged. One of the critiques of Lacan historically was he privileges vision because this mirror stage nonsense, right? So I think that gets that. I don't think that's right. I mean, I don't think it's right at all. I think it's true in taste. I mean, taste is obvious, right? Like certain tastes, like certain things just disgust me because they remind me of my mother, right? Like and her cooking, and they're just I put it in my mouth, I just have to spit it out. So that's something about objet in the I don't know what field that is, like the oral field, right? So yeah, so I think it's in every field.
And so and right, so just for the listeners, right? What we're talking about with the gaze is this unconscious activity on each of our parts, right? We're not aware we're doing this. It's this unconscious activity that actually makes it so there's things in the visual field that are desirable to us. The idea is that nothing in the visual field in and of itself is desirable. Right. We're the ones that make what we see desirable to us. This
unconsciously,
right?
Unconsciously, Michael, right? Like that's crucial. Yeah. And so absolutely.
This is why so in the comments to your video, I kind of went into this and then you responded, but I wanted to actually talk to you more about it. So for me, what light came on from your video here is that this unconscious activity on the part of desire, right? Or which we can call gaze here, right? This is in a way, and I know you're going to do the Hegelian like revision of this, but this is the theory of the gaze is basically Lacan's theory of transcendental desire, which is to say, for Kant, for those who don't know, Kant's huge innovation in the history of philosophy is that he's the first philosopher who really systematically argued that we ourselves are structuring our experience, that it's not like we're blank slates that just stand open to the world and the world just we passively receive the world as it is. For Kant, time, space, causality, substance, these are all categories of the mind that basically are like our software that organizes the raw data of sense experience into coherent, causal, spatial, temporal, substantial experience, right? So we're bringing
even objects. Yeah.
Yes, right. And so we're bringing these forms, these structures to experience. So when we experience something in the empirical world as causal, we take it like it's pure metaphysics, like that is just how it is outside of us. The transcendental insight is to go, that causal relation you see, that's us putting it there, but it happens unconsciously, which is a priori. And so we're not aware of this synthetic, which is to say this combinatory activity that we're doing, right? And so with gaze as objet, the cause of desire, what it's doing is making specific things stand out to us as desirable. It's imbuing desire in the field, but we think that things are just objectively desirable, just like we think things are objectively causal in the Kantians. But the trick is to see how we are actively doing this at an unconscious level. And that's what transcendental means here. We're not talking about transcendence like something outside of our experience, God or the eternal or whatever.
No, in fact, Mikey, Kant explicitly opposes transcendental to transcendent. It's a very, and the words in German, it's nice because this is a case where the German words are just the same as the English words. And so that's I think that's a key, what you just said is a really key point. So he's not, and he even famously says in the second preface to Critique of Pure Reason, I've had to limit knowledge to make room for faith, right? So he's getting rid of the transcendent in knowledge to allow us to then have faith in the transcendent if we can, right? Like, but yeah, what you're saying is, and I think you're exactly right to link Lacan to this Kantian project of, except what is he doing? He's adding the unconscious to so Kant's notion of the transcendental is, you said unconscious. It is what Freud would call descriptively unconscious, right? But it's not unconscious as a faculty. So it's
pre-conscious in
it's
some.
Exactly. Because if it wasn't pre-conscious, Kant couldn't go along and write the Critique of Pure Reason. So I think what's great about Lacan, I mean, I have, as you know, I have a lot of critiques, but I think that this is what is really great about him, that he brings, because Freud wasn't a philosopher, right? Freud he wasn't a philosopher. He never read Hegel. He read Nietzsche and then tried to stop. And he read Kant in a kind of non-serious way. And I think that he couldn't think through how you could import these psychoanalytic categories and problems into the philosophical exploration of subjectivity, transcendental subjectivity. And that is Lacan's great contribution, I think.
And so
exactly like you said.
Like the light that came on was this whole thing on gaze is not just, oh, he's talking about the visual. Like it's easy to read it like it's not essential or it's not the key thing. And some part of me sitting there going, no, this is his transcendental psychoanalysis.
Yeah, and I think there's something that maybe it's like the key insight in all of his thought. Right? Like maybe. I think. Yeah.
Yeah, and
for the reason you just said.
But here, I want to read your quote because what I said was, is the gaze just another way to talk about Kantian transcendental activity? I should have specified at the level of desire, not at the level of knowledge. But I said, is Lacan's theory of the gaze his transcendental psychoanalysis? And you said, in a sense, yes, but I would say that it's the point at which Lacan's Kantianism, which is his dominant mode, turns into dialectical Hegelianism. So, and it's because it puts us out there as the object, right?
Right. We're not just inside. Like in a way. Look, I think you mentioned before what Kant's main project is to say there are synthetic a priori judgments possible. That's a lot of jargon, but the idea is that we can make connections between things without relying on sense experience, right? And those connections are valid. And that is a dialectical insight, right? Because it connects things and it shows that, like, in a sense, Kant's trying to say we're out there in the object field, but then the problem is he has this other object field of the Ding an sich, right? Like the thing in itself that's beyond. And one of the things Hegel does is to say, no, there's no field beyond. We're out there as far as you can go. We're involved in this object field, even up to the thing in itself. And that's very controversial. And it's spawned a whole legion of Hegelians who just reject that idea and Kantianized Hegel. This is my favorite joke about this is I tried to read Hegel, but found out that I can't, right? Like that's what a lot of these, I think, I have immense respect for Robert Pippin and Robert Brandom, but I would say that joke applies to their reading of Hegel, right? They Kantian. This is not a point that's original to me, although I think Slavoj took that joke from me and put it in something. But at least he gave me credit. Usually, he takes the joke and it's gone. But I think that that's a really key idea that with the gaze. Isn't Lacan saying we're out there in this object world, not just in this Kantian? It's not just about the transcendental anymore, right? It is about the transcendental, but it's also about the way in which the transcendental we're as a transcendental, it shows we're implied in this object world that seems outside of us and neutral. Even things in themselves, like we're out in them. We can't hold on to this, oh, there's this realm beyond. And I think it's good that you mentioned religion, right? Because there is something, I'm going to put it in a way that's going to sound strange, but I think for Hegel, Kant's too Jewish, right? Like Hegel is a very Christian philosopher in the sense that God comes down to earth in the form of Christ, right? Whereas for Judaism, God has to remain. You can't even say Yahweh. Right, you have to say Adonai. You have to you have to speak only with God's nickname. You can't say the actual name, and you can't certainly write God down. You have to put the little hyphen in the middle, right? So all that's a Kantian. I mean, Kant was an anti-Semite. So this is ironic, right? But it is that's Kant is following from that, because there's this outside external thing, and doesn't gaze, as you nicely put it, break down that. And so all of a sudden we're touching God. Like all of a sudden I can, it's not just I touch myself, I actually touch God. And I think and God touches me in the gaze, right? And I think that's what the great, I think you're right to say, I didn't think that until you just said it now, but maybe that's the point at which Lacan goes the farthest, right, with gaze. And then that's why he retreats from it. You know, he can't, it's after seminar 13, there's just not one discussion of gaze. So he has, so he talks about that painting Las Meninas, the Velázquez painting. And I don't know if you've read the seminar, but so Foucault is there. I think I mentioned this video. Foucault is there. And Foucault wrote this very, very famous analysis in chapter 1 of Les mots et les choses, the order of things. And Lacan's like, incredible. I'm so honored to have Michel Foucault. He knows so much about this painting. And then Lacan goes, in the next session, I'm going to do my analysis, just complimenting Foucault's. And then the next session, Lacan's like, where's Michel Foucault? Like, why isn't he here? And then he proceeds to like completely demolish Foucault's reading the whole time, going, you see how I'm just complimenting what Foucault, just filling in a little gap. It's just like, so it's a typical, he's not a nice guy, Lacan. I mean, that's the other thing about it. It's funny, of course, but it's not nice. And so I think Foucault was probably wise to bail. But it's just funny that he must have unconsciously known I shouldn't come to this session when he's going to really get down to brass tacks.
That's great. Okay.
Mikey.
Yeah.
How many more you got, man?
Well, so I want to wrap. How many?
You want to talk? Hold on. You want to talk about gays for another hour? I mean, I'm down. I mean, let's.
Sorry, guys.
I think what is my gaze telling me in this situation? I'm trying to figure it out. I can't tell, but
care.
I keep noticing this one book above Todd's head. I don't know. No, I'm just kidding. So how many do I have? I don't know. I think Mikey's going to come back in with a few. I'm just going to come in here with a few and kind of stir the pot up a little bit, and then we'll see what happens. But basically, the thing I wanted to say about gays really quick is, Nance, do you feel like it's becoming more clear as a concept? Because I remember when we read the introduction to Todd's book on cinema and gays, we were confused as hell. Or at least we were really struggling.
Yeah, I think I think there's some like small inkling of definitely not understanding, but like, yeah, I kind of get that. I can smell what you're stepping in a little bit.
It's very safe the way you put that, because when we had Dwayne Roussel on today, he was saying there is no understanding. As soon as you think that you're understanding, you're fucked. And so, no, we don't understand, but we can smell it. So that's good enough. Yeah, for sure. 100%. Okay. Well, and I want to
help Dave and Nance. Do you guys think it would help with this concept if we called it something besides gays, if it had a different name?
I do think that would lead to less initial confusion, because like initially it does feel like it's other people looking at me, it's how I appear. Yeah,
like the semiotic, like if you do the Derridian or Saussurian thing, okay, so you have the word gaze, and then in the structure of long or language, it's like if you go, well, what does gaze mean? You want to do the Derridian Saussurian thing, and you go to other. It means look. It means to be perceived. It means blah 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 blah. And that cloud of semiotic elements constantly bends you back away from what Lacan is actually trying to tell you with. Todd, if you had to come up with a different term for this particular concept, what would you call it if we don't call it gaze?
Well, the visual object, I think. I mean, that would just be the simplest thing, I think. The visual object, right? Yeah. Something like that. Yeah.
But then the trick is, right?
It's not actually an object. I mean, I don't think there's any easy solution, because even objet I hate jargon, and so I wish we didn't have that term. I mean, I wish Lacan. Look, my advice to every thinker is never invent a term. And this is what I love. I love about Hegel. Like, he's hard to read, right? Like, Hegel's hard, but he never invents a single word. So you read Martin Heidegger, you're like, how many really? How many are you going to invent? And then Lacan, like, jouissance, I don't know, la langue. Come on. I just find that just uninteresting and lazy and just, yeah. So I appreciate, in French it's le regard. I appreciate it because he actually uses a real word and it's a simple word. So I don't know that I don't think you can improve it. I just think it's
so one of his famous statements from Seminar 10, he says, the or the objet petit a, desires, support, and fantasy isn't visible in what constitutes for man the image of his desire, which is to say, it's an invisible object, right?
Right. There you go. Yeah, there you go. That's the problem. Yeah.
Sorry, that's tricky, but
yeah.
There you go.
I want to first of all just stick up for the invention of new words. I think that we need to get outside of words that are if a word has several different meanings and these are hotly contested and they trigger people at a gut sort of level that is like pre-rational, and it actually shuts down the ability to be rational, then I say, let's steer away from that word. And
Dave, I don't object to that, but my point is, don't invent a whole new, use a different word that exists. My point, English has 1 million words. Like, just choose one that already exists. We don't need to invent. I mean, French is impoverished in terms of number of words, but still, you didn't need to invent it. But I don't disagree with what you just said at all. That seems to me evidently true.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. Cool. Yeah. All right, then we're all good. We're all good then.
Works. You did something by putting time and energy together, but it doesn't leave us for years. Objet, body without organs. I still. No. It doesn't do that.
Those are real words, David. They're real words. Time and energy. They're real words.
And I also wanted them to be intuitive and get to what's prior to everyone thinking, I don't have time and energy. Right. Okay. You all know. Okay. So, and by the way, Todd, Slavoj Žižek wrote a preface or a foreword for Time Energy. So the second edition is coming out soon. I just wanted to let you know.
That's great. Yeah. That's nice of him. Yeah.
I feel like he knighted me, Yeah. And it even pertains to the actual work. It's not just something that he kind of.
It's amazing. Yeah. It's hard for him to do.
Yeah. A lot of times his forwards are kind of just like something else that he puts there, Right. Okay. So today we've had on a lot of guests, and probably half of them are Lacanians, of various stripes. And noteworthy Leon Brenner, Dwayne Roussel, and Adrian Johnston. So this was a really cool day in that sense. And I've been asking everybody some set of questions. They're all related. It has to do with science and religion and epistemology and theory, and philosophically what we're doing when we theorize using concepts. Now, I mean, I think it was Brenner who originally brought this up. It wasn't even like his main agenda in the conversation. It was just kind of a thing, because I was kind of like, okay, trying to get down into like, what is this thing? And he was kind of like, well, and he kind of started talking about the definition is less important when he's talking about the clinical structures, because really what matters in this case is the position that the analyst takes up in reference to the analyst's stand, and how that whole relationship there, it needs to be different if the analyst is dealing with, say, a pervert as opposed to a psychotic. You don't treat the neurotic like the psychotic. You got to have some kind of an idea of like what their position is vis-a-vis language and repression and all of these other things, right? And so, that's I'll hopefully be able to put it in better terms after this course he's going to teach and all of that. But with that said, that raised this sort of can of worms. Now he's very, he's friendly to Ljubljana School. He's friendly to everything that you do. He loves you. He loves what you do.
He's friendly to me. Yeah, that's true.
But it's not always that way. In fact, the thing is like he's doing this as like a sort of like, hey, we could all get along, but the definition of these concepts is the relationship you take up in the clinic. And so as soon as you're doing stuff in the social, it's like you're dealing with a different kind of concept. Now it has to be defined. It's not about your position in that relationship. And so, and I'm saying that that's a very fair way to do it. Mikey, I want to set you up here just to kind of give us all a little taste here of what you've been put through as trying to be a warehouse working nobody guy who wants to understand these concepts, who writes about these concepts, who gets people who spit on you, more or less, right? Who think you shouldn't do that. In fact, you can't do that. Is that fair? Or how would you characterize it?
So here's the thing. Over the years, I have had run-ins with clinical Lacanians online that, and there's been numerous of these, and there's a specific group of them. I'm not naming names. I don't like that. Cancel or go harass them or call them. Fuck all that shit. They just fundamentally disagree with me and Todd and Slavoj and Dwayne and Adrian, and like you go down the list. It's I'm over on that side. That's as clear as day with Todd and Slavoj and Adrian, and right. Okay. So I have, but this isn't like it's not it sounds like I'm doing a straw man version of this, but no, they hold this line. Leon's in the middle, and I respect what he's doing, but these card carrying Lacanian analysts, they really believe that what Lacanian theorists are doing is trash, and they a lot of them will tell you they've told me that what I do on my blog is trash, what Todd does is trash, what Zizek does is trash, and that these concepts are only meaningful within the confines of clinical experience, and that's the only place they have meaning. And so I've had my online debates with these guys over the years, not anymore, but at one point, like I was on there defending Todd and Slavoj and all the rest of them, right? And so they just are completely dismissive of everything that Lacanians, especially those of us inspired by Zizek, do with social theory, with ideology, with politics, with cinema, right? Cinema studies. They don't think that objet or drive or fantasy or any of these things have anything to tell us about the social field. They're only applicable in the clinic, and I think that's as stupid as it fucking gets. And so I totally get this position where Leon's coming from, where okay, they're he views it as these are clinical concepts, help to navigate the analysis of therapy of an analysan. Totally get it. Cool. But Leon doesn't go to this other extreme that these other guys, these other Lacanians go to. And I think there's lots of reasons why these other guys go to. I don't give a shit to say. I think they're jealous of theorists. Theorists get all the attention. Theorists are the ones who are invited to do interviews. Theorists are the ones everybody talks about. And sorry, nobody gives a fuck about analysts, like except maybe your little cartel of the people you know. But and here's the thing: people go, "You don't respect
or
the
your
work
patients."
I didn't say that. I didn't
or your
say
patients.
I respect the work psychoanalysts do.
Your patients might also like respect you, but it's kind of a private relationship there. It's not like something they can go and talk about on streams or something, so it's already kind of like.
And here's the thing, your basic Lacanian theory, if anybody knows it, you start seeing how pathological they're being about this, where even if what they were saying about us theorists using these concepts is true, they're pathological as fuck about it, because they do this, or at least at one point they were having these rant sessions every day on social media about Lacanian Zizekian theorists. And so you see the repetition, you see all the, and it's like, no, you enjoy this and you're jealous and blah, blah, blah. And as far as just the level of theory, I'm sorry, Freud himself he was talking about social phenomena, civilization and its discontents, right? Freud, and this idea that, and I've told you this, my criticism is they set up a Derridian metaphysics of presence. Like these signifiers only have this pure meaning within the confines of this little space, and outside of them, they have no meaning. When in fact, psychoanalysis as a discourse emerged within a natural language. It's not like purified of natural language. It's completely embedded in it. And so that's been my issue with it. Now, hold on. All I want to say is because I want to hand this over to Todd, but the one question I had that was like a pivot away from the gaze.
Well, I haven't asked the question yet, but yes, you should do that and then hand it to Todd, and then I'll ask my question after that. But keep going. Yes,
Todd. So with all that, and then I want to ask this, and then take it and run. So here's my question, though. This idea that Lacan is just an analyst, training analyst. I know that's what he said, but your position is no, actually, he's primarily a philosopher, even if he doesn't want to fess up to it. And there's evidence for this throughout his work. Like, so, okay, this whole thing that we were talking about with gaze, how our transcendental desire structures the field of visual perception. Okay, the gaze is a theory of how desire shapes visual perception. What clinical purpose does Lacan's theory of the gaze serve exactly? Is Lacan primarily a philosopher or analyst? It's just when you see that he's doing all of this like transcendental theorizing about how structure imbues the visual field, you start going, how is this relevant to clinical practice? It seems more of a psychoanalytic theory of visual perception more than something that an analyst is going to use to get somewhere. So, okay, I'm done.
Yeah, I have a response, but Dave, do you want to go ahead and ask a question?
Yeah. Well, so before you, because maybe I want to add to that a little bit, and just to say where I'm going with this is to say that, okay, so there is gatekeeping. It's a serious issue. Mikey should be able to think. Workers need to be able to like get concepts and think, and people who are trying to keep that from happening, you know, they're not our favorites. But with that said, as a philosophy person, especially someone who came out of, I'd say 10 years of various clubs, discussion groups, courses, classes, I was TA adjunct for various professors. I've done a lot. I've been all over the place, and a lot of these people were analytic philosophers. They didn't take too seriously a lot of the things that I was most interested in, or they didn't even think that philosophy can really deal with them. And you know, there was a phase, I think, where I was just kind of like, well, then screw them. I don't care. But also, I think in the continental philosophy scene, it's common for once a person gets their guy, then they just talk to people who like that guy. It's usually a guy. And then from there, we just kind of assume these are the concepts, and these are the concepts for making sense of the world. Okay, which is great. I think that continental philosophy can help us see and make sense of not just ourselves to live the examined life, but also society and history and social change in a way that no other field is capable of dealing with. And that's why I'm here. But there's this epistemic humility and rigor question that I have when it comes to all of the continental philosophers, right? I mean, especially with you just finished Division 2 of Being in Time. Heidegger goes from being very, very careful in how he's doing everything to really kind of being super he just leans into assertional. I've been to the top of Mount Sinai, and, you know, he kind of goes on guru mode. Okay, well, that becomes very common in continental circles. And at least with Heidegger, he's showing his work in a lot of cases. Like he doesn't just, and even when it seems like he just threw something out there, well, he already developed it in a previous lecture course, and he kind of assumes that you know that. Mm-hmm. Obviously, with Lacan, it's not so easy to get to the bottom of how he comes to anything. Now, I understand like the typical Lacanian response is, well, you know, it comes from the clinical experience. He was he's there in the clinic, so he comes up with these concepts. It's like, well, I wasn't there. And so.
And he doesn't give us case studies.
He doesn't give us case studies. And so the whole question is like, well, any concept that is really slippery and hard to pin down, there's also this part where you got to be like, okay, but even if it helps me see things a certain way, are there other things that could help me see these things. And so why am I going with this as opposed to these ones? Ultimately, that responsibility is on me as a thinker. I have to sort through that. That kind of looking to other plausible accounts, for instance, is definitely lacking in the continental scene in general. I think it's pretty easy to say that. There are exceptions, but that's kind of the concern I raise. Now, this was not really Leon's doing. But he did spark it for myself and probably like another 6 people who are really into this channel. And it's because of our own conscience. We're doing philosophy. So, we want to be taken seriously by people who aren't just Lacanians. And so, when we're using a Lacanian concept, there's this whole question of like its origin, its method, its scope of application or efficacy. And then when we're dealing with things, whether those things translate. And, you can just say, fuck it, I don't give a shit. And I'll take that and be very happy, Todd, for real. But also, I am curious if you've put any thought into these matters. So that's pretty much the question. And then we'll get into the religion and science thing after that.
Yeah, I have put a lot of thought into this, actually. And I find it really interesting that I've had very warm relations with practicing analysts. Like I'll just name a few, like Stephanie Swales, Molly Rothenberg, mostly women, interestingly enough. Manya Steinkühler, just there's numerous, Jessica Dademan, just numerous people. Carol Owens, the people that have invited me, and there's been no issue at all with, and they'll talk about analytic practice, and I'll just say, well, I've been a patient. That's all I can't really speak to that. But so I haven't had so much that issue, but I do. So I think it's also a class thing with Mikey, really. I mean, I think that was part of what's going on there. But that said, I mean, here's the thing I would say, this initial problem, like, I think we could play the game the other way, right? Like you can say, okay, that's fine. We won't use any of these concepts, clinical concepts, but then you can't use any of the concepts Lacan took from German idealism in the clinic. Okay, so sorry. So you don't get to, you don't get to use you actually lose objet a because that's a concept that comes from German idealism. You don't get like signifier signified because that comes from Saussure and linguistics, right? So it seems like there's a whole kind of apparatus that if we play the game the other way, then you lose in the clinic. So I just think and Mikey said this to me, Lacan is a thinker in the German idealist tradition. And I think he shifts between being a Kantian and being an Hegelian. And, my allegiances. So I think there's a certain part I think is the most interesting part, and other part that's less interesting, although I don't mean to disparage Kant, but I also think that's the answer to your ultimate question, right? Like, well, where do these concepts come from? They don't come from the clinic. They don't come from the clinic. I mean, certain ones do, but even those, like even Short Session, his big clinical, I mean, maybe Big Other is the great thing, but he gets Big Other from your guy, from Heidegger. Big Other is Das Mann, right? But basically, psychoanalyze, like unconscious inserted into Das Mann. So even then, even his great clinical advance, and then of course Short Session, but that's quilting point, which is kind of from structural linguistics. So where is it? Where's the great clinical only insight by Lacan? I don't want to play the game the other way. Like, I don't want to take away people's clinical things. They should have all these tools, but just don't come to us and say, okay, you can't think philosophically about these Lacanian concepts because you just can't. You just would have to do it the other direction too, and then you're screwed. You have no Lacanian praxis at all. So I think it's just a question that cannot be addressed. It should not be addressed. And anytime it's brought up, it should just be silenced absolutely, because you can just do the other thing and then they can't say anything, because you can show systematically how all these concepts come from either structural linguistics or from German idealism, right?
Or
Unconscious is injected in, so that's the psychoanalytic Freudian idea. But that's it. So I think that's what I would say about that. And I think that's also the ground for responding like, okay, you're using a certain Lacanian concept, gaze, I don't know, objet, enjoyment. Where do you get that? Well, I think you get it from this history of German idealist thinking, which is pretty, like, even analytic philosophers, there's a divide, of course, on Hegel, but even that's being corrected, I think, because of these people I mentioned, Pippin, Brandon. But on Kant, everybody accepts that Kant makes real art. I mean, they don't love his arguments, but they accept that he makes real arguments. And I agree with you that it's incumbent upon, I had a little debate with Graham Harman. It was maddening to me in certain ways, but maddening to him as well. But I thought it was great because it was really a chance. He's a very nice guy. I like to get, just what you said, like get out of a certain bubble and not just talk to the converted. And I mean, I don't define myself as Lacanian. I know you probably put me in that group of the Lacanians you had, but I don't see myself that way. But I think that what you said about the rigor of the argument is, I think, absolutely essential, right? Like, if you're not doing that, I just was in a little email exchange with a great friend of mine, Sheila Kunkel, Lacanian. She's really Lacanian, and she's arguing about sexuation formulas, right? And I'm just like, and she gives me these quotations that just are a bunch of assertions, and I said, okay, like, yeah, you could extend, they're just assertions. So I feel you on that. I feel you. Like, I think there is this tendency to just assert it. I love that about Slavoj. I love that about Joan Kopchak. Like, they're not asserters, right? Like, Slavoj's trying to use, I think he's the best maybe thinker ever of the example, right? Like, he uses the example. So he's really showing you that's what Hegel does, right? Like, Hegel converted philosophy, and this is why analytic philosophers don't like him. Like, he converted philosophy from the argument to the example, or you could say, like, from argument to drama, right? Like, how is a thing dramatized? That's how we see the truth of it, not how you argue it, because the argument always hides a drama. And if you show the drama, then you show the truth of a thing. And I think that's what Slavoj is so great about doing. I mean, it doesn't always come together in a complete system, which is, I think, people that find him maddening, that's what's maddening, right? Like, even this 1,000-page book on Hegel, you're like, wait a minute, what's this thing? Does it fit with this thing? I don't know. Where does it come together? But that's because he's really a thinker of the fecundity of the example for him. And I think that's a basic Hegelian idea, that the drama of the example reveals the truth. And that's different from argument, but I think it's equally, if not more, valid.
That's really good. Thank you. Yeah, no, that gives me a lot to think about, because I mean, the way I was thinking about it was that in the split between Kant and analytic philosophy after Kant, it's like caring about argument went the analytic route, except that I wasn't thinking of it in terms of argument. I mean, continentals, they argue. I mean, it's never really like the same. But you're right. No, it's examples. It is by example. And that's a really great point. Yeah. And the phenomenology of spirit is just example after example after example.
Example
right?
after example after example. Right.
I think even Dave, Heidegger, like with that great example of the hammer, a strict analytic philosopher would tell us that's not an argument. But to you and me, okay, it doesn't have the structure of thesis 1, thesis 2, conclusion, but he's describing something. He's trying to show you something, which is he's trying to the best of his ability to give you evidence for the point he's going to make. And so, this idea, part of it is a difference in format. Analytic philosophers love that bullet point style of, moving from proposition to conclusion. And continental philosophy tend to.
There's this book by Michael. Sorry. There's a book by Michael. I think it's by Michael Dunn. It's called Parting of the Ways, and it's about the Husserl-Frege divide. And I think it's like Husserl is on the side of descriptive phenomenology, so of the example, right? And then Frege is on the side of logical argument. And what's interesting is that they both reach a certain, like, phenomenology reaches this problem of the unconscious that it can't get past, and then Frege reaches this problem of Russell's paradox. So they each run into this fundamental barrier, right? That they can't get beyond. And I think we still are wrestling with those two problems in both of those fields.
That's a really good example, because those two actually talked to each other. They wrote letters to each other.
They did. Right. Exactly.
They thought about their problems. Now they didn't. It's not like they were buddies, and it's not like they went super hard together. But they did try to, oh yeah, what are you working on? Oh, I'm working on something similar. There was a bit of a conversation there, whereas they're direct inheritors of those projects, Heidegger and Bertrand Russell. No talking.
Never
it's
talked.
done.
Right.
And never again shall the twain meet, unless Negarestani or Johnston is indeed overcoming this divide. Both of them are attempting to do so. Power to them. And now I know we really don't have that much more time here, but the science of religion question, I guess, when you just go to example instead of argument, when epistemology kind of gets thrown out the door, it opens another door, right? For kind of, I would say, it's not reason based anymore. It's just, it really does kind of like, hey, come on in, gurus. And so people really can kind of come in and just start using concepts that sound smart. And now they're not trying to, it's one thing to say, this is why I think this. It's another thing to say, this is why I think this, and I think this is a reasonable position, and other people should be able to come to this position if they at least agree with certain operating assumptions, right? And now there's a fear, or maybe it's just an actual thing, that there is this resurgence of religion. And now, of course, if it's a fear, then that's by people who think that's a really bad thing. Obviously, Adrian Johnston, he does not like it. He's a hardline atheist and materialist. And so that's, I was asking him questions about that. I was asking Dwayne questions about that. And I had other people on throughout the day, and I always kind of brought up the religion question. And, this tension between religion and science that really emerges prior to the time of Descartes, but that he really is addressing, especially in his discourse on method, because he's mediating this divide. And of course, Kant was trying to mediate this divide. It doesn't seem to be going away. It seems to be polarizing. And I wonder, what is the role of Lacanian psychoanalysis in all of this, culturally, socially, now that it has become a part of the zeitgeist for making sense of things? And now that we do have Lacanians who are really into theology, bringing that stuff in, either Boothby or Mark Gerard Murphy, who I hope to have on soon to talk about these things, right? Like, these guys are...
Peter Rollins.
Peter Rollins, great example.
Sure.
Exactly. Yeah. And so I guess I kind of just want a pulse check on you, and then we'll come back to it later. But like atheism, religion, science, epistemology, philosophy, what is to be done?
Yeah. I mean, Adrian, it's interesting. So Adrian, I'm really good friends with Adrian, but he's much more atheistic than I am, and sees my book on Hegel as a what would he call it? Like a derivation from, because it's very Christian, right? Like, I mean, it just is. It laments this way that Hegel's Christianity is written out of left-wing Hegelianism. So, yeah, I mean, I don't have the same anti-religion take that other people do, simply because I don't believe that it's possible to not be religious. Like, I think, so I think there are certain people that think religion is manipulation by priests, right? Like that was Freud's position, to be honest. That was Freud's. It's absolutely his position. That was not Lacan. I mean, I think I just said I'm not Lacanian on most issues, but on religion, I think I'm closer. Although I'm more aligned with, you mentioned Rick Boothby. I mean, he and I basically think the same thing. I mean, we have these little private things where we're like, would you call yourself Christian? And we kind of go, and my two twin boys are like, you can't call yourself Christian. Your idea of what it means is just too removed from what most people think. So you shouldn't be saying that. But I don't know. I feel like I don't mind reclaiming that. So he and I kind of go through that. But I think that that one of what things that Lacan says is that, and one of the ways he goes beyond Freud is, so Freud famously said religions should be classified as the mass delusions of humanity, right? So psychosis is religion. Lacan thinks, no, actually, and I think that religion is a way in which we address ourselves to some kind of abyss within the other, right? Like something that cannot be grasped, or something fundamentally unknown. And that's what religion. So yeah, okay, of course, priests manipulated and televangelists manipulated, and all these Alabama Supreme Court manipulated, of course. But the fundamental religious opening is, I think, actually, and this is Hegel's point as well, a very radical one. And I think that Christ is a radical figure, and I think that we should never, ever give ground on that. I just think it's not, I think that and I think Peter Rollins is a good figure in this. I can't tell you how much I love Peter and what he does. Like, he's just a great guy, and really important, I think, in the contemporary world. And and he does all these different things. Like, he's like Lent without God. I mean, he's maybe more atheistic than I am, but I think it's one of the things is atheism for Lent. But it's all in the context of the church, and I think there's something pretty good about that project. Anyway, so that's all. I mean, I think that I don't see religion as avoidable, and I think the way in which science becomes a religion for most liberals today is a really lamentable thing. When I hear people say trust science, I want to puke, because look, here's why. Because science is obviously, I believe in science, believe in science. I'm not an idiot, but I think that the questions that science pursues are themselves ideologically determined. That's why science doesn't have a subject, right? Like it's absolutely key to science, or else there would be no science, right? So it doesn't matter. In other words, Einstein discovers special relativity, right? But it didn't matter that he did. Like, somebody else could have. Werner Heisenberg could have. Kurt Gödel could. It doesn't matter, right? Like, that's the whole. And someone else had to be able to validate it after Einstein. So Einstein's subjectivity is indifferent to the scientific discovery. But the questions that science pursues have to be, they're politically determined. Like, people will say like, oh, well, science shows that, I don't know, that there's a gene for alcoholism, let's just say, right? Like, okay, why are we looking in the genetic material for the cause of alcoholism? Why is that a thing we're looking for? And if we didn't look for it, then we obviously wouldn't have found it. Even if it exists, I don't know if it exists. I don't know the answer to this question. You see what I'm saying? Like, we could be focused on a whole other thing scientifically, right? Think about all the vast regions of knowledge that are just left vacant.
It's kind of an example of gaze, right?
Exactly. Yes. Like, our desire is shaping where our scientific inquiry, like, think about how many, there's probably at the University of Vermont, there's probably 600 neuroscience majors, right? So why aren't there 600 astrophysics majors? Well, because NASA's going under, and no one's, you see what I'm saying? Like, there's not, that's not where we're focused. But to me, that's more interesting. Like, why aren't there 600 quantum mechanics majors? Much more, or quantum gravity, much more interesting, right? Like, quantum gravity theorists are like, maybe time doesn't exist at all, even in this kind of, it's only this Kantian as a form of our intuition, right? So that's pretty radical, but there's not this mass of focus on that. Why? Because we can't create pharmaceuticals or whatever out of it, right? So,
and this is
not
where
that I'm against pharmaceuticals, but it's ideological.
Well, I mean, I think we all have questions about the industry itself, but the
industry, right?
Yeah,
that's all
for sure. Well, bringing that's what I was going to say about science is, like, thinking about the book Disciplined Minds by, I think his name's Jeffrey Schmidt or something like that. Do you know that book, Disciplined Mind?
I don't know it, but I'm going to look it up. Thank you.
Yeah, definitely check it out. It's all about, so, I mean, it's not just, scientists They have to get grants. You know, that's obviously part of it. So, you know, this gaze, it's like, okay, well, nobody's just interested in X, Y, or Z things that are on offer for them to research. Well, who is interested in that? And he traces back the money in a lot of these cases. It's the weapons manufacturing industry. So it's like you're over here doing infrared stuff and it's really cool. And you're looking at all these different kinds of animals that might or might not like use infrared in various ways. You're trying to learn from them and it's just fascinating. But who's funding you? You're like, oh, it's just this one entity. But if you go back a couple more steps, oh, it's actually it's the weapons manufacturing industry, right? And it's the same thing with
think about what we were concerned about with nuclear physics, right? Like what I'm just thinking about this movie Oppenheimer because it's so much, but think about how much was invested in that could have been invested in so many other more interesting questions of physics, right? And then it just wasn't. So it's not, so give me a break on this. Like, it's just this, like the whole inquiry is trust science. It's objective. It's just, sorry. That's just a liberal lie. It's not true. It's not true. Like, again, like what they discover, they're not cheating, but the area that they're focused on and science has real results that are different from mythology and all this other kind of crap, right? Like it is really something, it is really a thing that's different, but it's not just a neutral thing at its starting. And I think that has to absolutely be understood. Otherwise you're spouting off an totally ideological positioning.
You know,
couldn't agree more.
Really, you know, the connection to science is really great. And so I guess one thing I was going to say earlier, Todd, is part of the issue with gays and why I think it's so tricky for people to get is it's like, and I'm speaking as like a student here, we want existential examples of gays. We want how it relates to science, how it relates to religion. And like a connection like that really helps illuminate it in a broader sense. And so I think that's the issue, is that most of the time examples are either cinematic or analysts just theorize about it and never even provide an example.
Or paintings, right? Like, I think like David is right. Like, this is an example. If you look at science, it's a concrete example of how the gaze shapes what we're even looking for, right? Like, we don't even see all these other, I mean, a few people see them, but basically no one sees this whole other thing that's like, could be more important than anything else because we're not even looking for it. We don't, I mean, there are fields of scientific inquiry we don't have names for. We don't have majors and we don't have names for because they're not lucrative or interesting to people, right? And I'm not going to put a judgment on it. It could be just not interesting to people, but it's still a possible field.
Dave, do I have time for one little thing real quick?
Rudy's in the group here and had asked a question. I don't know if you saw it. He also shared it in the live stream chat. I kind of thought it would be cool to let him actually ask it, but I also, I do want you to be able to do that.
But here's the thing. I just want to make a comment. Like, we can bring this up with Todd next time we talk to him. But all I'll say is, okay, so first off, everybody, if you're interested in this whole thing with Lacanian psychoanalysis and religion, there was this debate between Adrian Johnston and Richard Boothby that occurred about a year ago. Andrew and Nick, our friends, were there at Duquesne for this debate. And so you have these two Lacanians and they disagree. Like Todd was saying, he's more on Richard's side, which I was telling you this week. Richard Boothby has to be on one of these streams at some point. You know, he's completely relevant to everything you were talking about today. You know this, Dave, that on a philosophical level, I tend more with Adrian. And so, Todd, the only thing I want you to comment real quick, but we can bring this up at another time. It's just, there's a way of viewing Lacanian psychoanalysis as part of its ultimate aim, you could say, even in a clinical setting, is to help the subject come to terms with the fact that there is no big other, which you could say is the ultimate atheist gesture. Because what you're saying, you're trying to get us to lose our investment in higher authority. There's nobody who can actually tell me how I should be, what I should desire. It's all groundless, and I have to take a stand. Like, this is the ethics of psychoanalysis. I eventually, even though my desire is obviously infused by the other's desire, part of it is, no, I'm taking a stand and taking responsibility for my desire, even if it's imbued by the other, right? I act on my desire in this sense, right? Which involves reckoning with the fact there is no external other. I shouldn't put Christ above me. I shouldn't put Buddha above me. I shouldn't put Yahweh above me. They can't help me when it comes to my desire or how I should live. I have to take that responsibility for myself. So in a way, isn't that the ultimate atheist gesture that most religious fundamentalists would absolutely despise? Is that there is no absolute authority. Stop investing in these figures.
That's what's so great about Christianity, right? Because it shows how Christ himself is a divided subject who dies on the cross, right? Like that's the great, like in Christ, God has to come down to earth and suffer and be divided like a regular human. And that's what God is. So I think that's, to me, you just gave the great argument for Christianity in your argument for atheism. So,
but you know that but this is as a
I know,
like the average Christian. Christ, you can't throw any doubt on anything. You can't go.
They're heretics, man.
Arguments. He made assertions. You can't even do anything like that. Like
they're heretics.
You cannot challenge the authority of Christ.
Yeah, they're heretics. They're Christian heretics, man.
Okay, well, yeah, we'll get into that more at some point. But Dave, Rudy, okay, I'm done.
You're muted, Dave.
Oh, all of that talking and I was not even heard. Rudy, I was saying, calling Rudy. I was trying to talk over them, but I'm glad it didn't work out because that would have sounded so rude. But I was saying we will get into these things for sure in the near future, hopefully.
Sure.
But Rudy, if you're there, you could ask your question really quick. But we've got Anna Greenspan joining us in about, well, hopefully 5 to 6 minutes. So if you could ask your question really quick, then Todd can kind of incorporate it into his closing statements.
Thank you. I was thinking about, because Mike, you were asking this about what is the desire of the eye, and so I was thinking that is the desire of the eye to miss/recognize, because I was thinking that like even in the biological function, we now think that there's this mirror thing in the eye happening. Yeah, it's put on its head and then the brain turns it around. So that's what I was thinking about and asking.
Yeah, I think that's, I mean, so Lacan's whole theory, and I think this is the theory of, this is where psychoanalysis really has an insight, right? Is that the biological function undergoes this encounter with signification, the signifier, and that creates a distortion of the biological function. But what I love about your question is that your point is the biological function itself is distorted, right? Like there's something that isn't, it doesn't just, things aren't just working out clearly. There's this reversal, this camera obscura effect, even of the biological function. So I think that's nice, the way in which the distortion isn't just, this is a point I think Hegel makes, that the distortion isn't just subjectivity. There's a subjectivity is in a way formulating, making present, making us aware of this fundamental distortion in our as entities.
Hey Dave, you're not muted.
Okay, good to know. For real? Okay.
Yeah.
You hear me talking?
We
Okay.
were just getting,
yeah. Anyway, I'll wrap up in 2 seconds. So I think, thanks for having me, and Mikey, thanks for the discussion. So we talked a lot about gaze, and I think it's really obviously an important concept, but I really think that the defense of psychoanalysis or the use of psychoanalysis outside the clinic. But I think that maybe the most important idea is that, and I think this touches on the science question, is that there's this slant in every way in which we encounter the world, right? And so what psychoanalysis, I think the best thing about it, what it wants to make us aware, that we can become aware of that slant, but we can't control that slant. So that slant is our unconscious. And so we can recognize it when it takes us by surprise. So gaze would be a case where we encounter this object where it all of a sudden it throws off our world. The other things that do that are the joke, the slip. I think the slip is maybe the great example. My spouse Hillary Neroni was saying to me that the gaze is like the slip in the visual field. It's like the Freudian slip in the visual field. I thought that was a great point. And so I think that's the thing that I would want to underline as I sign off. Thanks for having me, guys.
Thank you so much, Todd. It was an honor to have you.
Take care. Have a good
Everybody
luck with
will
the
be
last
right.
one.
Thank you.
Yeah.
And we'll be right back after this. Play the longer one here.
Thinking is super uncool, and that's why you should do it. It's just like almost anything that's like cool anymore. Yeah, it just sucks. And I think that's like what the underground movement has always been about, is just like seeing what's in the mainstream, being like it ain't there, and kind of like cobbling something together, you know? And yeah, it's a little mismatched, but that's like its beauty.
We cannot do direct revolution, but the only way to lay the foundation for it is to do what you are doing to move the underground. It's a theoretically correct title.
Welcome to Theory Underground, where workers with earbuds can find genuine liberation from necessity.
Research at Theory Underground focuses on what is most important for understanding our current situation. Theory of the subject, capital, time-energy theory, critical media theory, CMT, and the most essential critiques necessary for understanding why the theory, ideology, and common sense of influencers left to right misses the mark.
We bring primary texts from leading lights of diverse fields to bear on topical issues and works popular in our current world. Theory Underground is a publishing house as well as lecture course and social media platform.
You've been reading Underground Theory.
Yes.
And
amazing book. I'm a publisher and an editor. I run and review books. Literally, it's my living. This is the best edited collection I've ever read.
Jesus Christ.
Seriously.
This is a little experiment in what I, David McCarricker, can pull off without relying on the academy or the algorithmic dictates of the attention economy.
Usually a good edited collection has good essays, but you only want to read a few. Every essay makes me want to read the other essays because you have a vision. Everyone that you invited for a reason. You weren't some fake publicist who's like, how's so-and-so's a new book? Have them on your show. No, you only talk to people because you've read shit by them that you've thought about, that you think has value, even if you disagree. So I think that's what's amazing.
I believe that I am, like so many others, pioneering a future in which educators can form learning webs that will make learning as a way of life enjoyable and emancipatory. However, before these tools become accessible, they have to be experimented with. That's why I built my own website and app using nothing more than my own saved wages, 5 patrons, and some small classes of students over the last year. Of course, I also have had my wife Anne's moral support and help with accounting so that I don't get in trouble with the IRS or whatever. In less than a year, Theory Underground has already put out 8 courses, 2 books, one, my book, Time Energy, and the other, Underground Theory, which has over 30 contributors, including works written by students at Theory Underground, some of my fellow travelers, and colleagues in the broader universe of Underground Theory. Beyond the books and courses, though, you will also find interviews, reading exegetical reaction sessions, and live weekly events for working class autodidacts, independent researchers, and renegade academics. These include a variety of clubs and cohorts that meet on a weekly or monthly basis. If you want to get involved, there are 4 main subscription levels.
Think of it like a gym membership, but for your mind.
The point is to make learning, practice, and theoretical comprehension a way of life. Support at this stage of the operation is more crucial than ever because my savings were used up over the last year of getting this established. If I can triple my subscribers in the next 2 months, I can quit my gig at Amazon and focus on this work full time. All I need is a few more people at each of the levels or a couple big time patrons who just want to see it happen. Right now I am doing a patron and site subscriber drive, so excuse the commercial. But if you end up really liking what goes on at this channel, consider signing up soon. If you cannot afford it, but want to get involved with some of the stuff behind the paywall, I have made a financial aid scholarship you can sign up for here in the description. Quick side note, some people ask about the profit motive. At this point, I have not actually made a return on any of my investment in terms of the amount of time, energy that I put into things, the amount of savings I've actually put into things, the opportunity cost of the work that I'm doing as opposed to the other kinds of things that I could be doing for money. But more importantly, I don't actually make enough to pay for my cost of living. The goal is to make enough for my cost of living And then once that is achieved, everything over that amount is going to go towards expanding the operation to the point where I can hire Michael Downs, aka Mikey of The Dangerous Maybe, to be a full-time researcher and part-time teacher at Theory Underground. All right, so with that aside, I just want to say also, if you are a worker with earbuds, what's up? I see you. I work at Amazon part-time, and everything I do is for my past self who used to work there full-time. Most workers with earbuds couldn't care less about theory, but I do believe a working class intellectual revolution could grow out of the underground theory scene. My hope is that what I have built here will contribute to making the scene something more than just a scene, and you into something more than just a scene kid. We're trying to make this into a real intellectual milieu capable of leading a way forward beyond the imminent crises facing humanity. But for that, we need thinking now more than ever.
Start thinking.
I hope that you either will or have enjoyed the program, and also make sure to like, comment, subscribe, and leave this playing in the background all the time while you're doing other things.
Playing long-form Theory Underground content in the background while you do things has, in the near future, been scientifically proven to emancipate minds from the functional illiteracy imposed on workers by the structural stultification of time energy. This is achieved by reterritorializing circumspective concern.
Also, to some degree, it is for the algorithm.
I can get my motion before your mind!
I love you so much.
I love you too.
All right, everybody, welcome to Theory Underground. I'm your host, David McCarricker, and today we're joined by Anna Greenspan. Welcome.
Hello.
It's an honor to have you.
Thank you.
I want to introduce you to my co-host for this epic marathon stream, Nance, and Michael Downs, who was only really able to join us towards, I guess, the last couple of guests. But I think Mikey, out of anybody here, has probably prepared the most for this conversation because he has been reading your work now for a long time, and he just taught a course where he spent like the first couple of sessions really diving into a lot of your bases in theory and stuff like that. And so I kind of want to just set him up to I want him to introduce you. I think he's better fit to the task. So you get the honor there, Michael.
Okay, so yeah, Anna, it's great to meet you. I have had a long interest now in CCRU, in your individual work. Everybody who is a member of the CCRU, the whole accelerationist thing, and all of this has been fundamental to my own philosophical development. And so it's a real honor to have you here. And so, yeah, like I recently, back in October, taught my first course on Nick Land, and it was a 4-week course. The last session was focused on CCRU, and it was a great time. And part of it was, I wanted to, CCRU, and it's such a part of the philosophy world on Instagram, in the meme world. A huge impact CCRU continues to have on everybody. But a lot of the times when people are just making philosophy memes, the nuances of the philosophy get lost. And so I've always been really interested in the work that you guys did as a collective on time, cybernetic time, temporality. And with your work, I follow it, the work on megacities, especially Shanghai, the stuff you're doing now with wave philosophy, which is primarily what we want to talk about tonight, is your new work. But no, it's just a treat to meet you. CCRU has influenced so many of us, and it's just great to have you here. And we're looking forward to talking about what you're working on now, in particular. For listeners, I want to say that Anna's most recent book that came out in, it was last year, right? 2023. It's called China and the Wireless Undertow, Media as Wave Philosophy. And so all of us are super interested in media theory, starting with Marshall McLuhan and then going all the way, Baudrillard, all the way up, right? And so we're interested in this theory you're working out of wave philosophy as it relates to media theory. And so, yeah, I think to start, it would be great just to give the audience an introduction to what you're working on in this new book you just published.
Okay, thank you for your interest. I think, like you say, at all of the people involved with the CCRU, probably the biggest influence, or at least from my point of view, the biggest influence was this understanding, or perhaps we could say discovery, that time as we empirically perceive it, as we are engaged with it on a sort of phenomenological basis, is not, real time, or there are other structures in which temporality takes place, and other ways of thinking about and very occasionally experiencing time. And so that, I think, that was an influence that for me has stayed with me. And I think for me, another someone was talking about this recently. So the other big thing that I think has stayed with me is the theorization that comes out of Deleuze and Guattari of transcendental materialism. So taking the Kantian mode of thinking that we are conditioned by certain a prioris, right? Space and time and the categories, etc. But as you know, that Kant located those in the mind of the rational subject. And what Deleuze and Guattari's move is to say that those structures are embedded in the material world. And so that there's this idea of an abstract materialism, right? That the materialist environment creates the conditions through which we experience the world. So that seems in some ways like a very obvious and simple point to me, and especially when we think about media, right? And I say this to my students, it's like media is not just a tool that we use, it's the conditions through which we are formed as subjects and through which we experience the world. So, to sort of briefly, well, I feel like I could just go on and on, so I don't want to do that. Let me say, the book is about electromagnetic waves as the media infrastructure of the contemporary moment, as a kind of, I was looking for something that kind of seemed like this abstract material infrastructure. And these waves, which we can't easily perceive, we can only perceive through mediated instruments, through our cell phones or through our technologies, right? I was interested in that. And I'm always also interested in this issue about how to think about time in relation to this moment in which, this became more and more clear as I wrote the book, that if we are trying to understand our the contemporary media sphere, we have to grapple with China. And I don't think that's just because I happen to live and work in China. I think that's just like become clear to the rest of the world as well. So that's kind of what this book in some ways is about.
Yeah, and at the beginning there's a chart. I'm interested. There's these 5 waves that you see, and you've got like a wave theory of at least modern history. And curious to know, the more of the details of how you develop that.
Yeah. So that idea also was really something that CCRU already was interested in, this idea of the K wave. So this is a structure of techno-capitalism that is posited by the economist Nikolai Kondratiev in initially, and then is taken up by, most famously, the economist Joseph Schumpeter. And if there's many waves and cycles in ways that people talk about capitalism, like business cycles of various lengths. This is what is known as the long cycle. So it's a cycle of about 50 years. And it's the idea is that, as Schumpeter takes it, is that modern capitalism, he's known as someone who talks about the evolutionary notion of modern capitalism, right? So you cannot think about capitalism as a system that is static in any way. Capitalism is a process that is continuously evolving. And what he saw and posited, or his theory is that its mode of evolution, its mode of being is through these waves. That's how it works in these 50-year waves. And what's interesting about Schumpeter's take-up of this theory is that he puts, why do these waves happen? He says it's because of technological change. And that technological change is in fact the motor of these things. And so for him, things like politics or whatever, everything else is a kind of epiphenomena from these technological changes. And what's interesting about the wave theory is that the technological advance, the innovation, occurs at the bottom of the wave. So, like the semiconductor or the light bulb or these kind of steam engines, right? They happen at the bottom of the wave and they power the next wave. And so it's when these technologies then spread throughout society that you get into this kind of up curve that then peaks, and investment in those technologies is no longer doesn't give you anything. Everything becomes more and more expensive. And then this pattern goes into play where there's a kind of search for the next thing. And so this wave pattern goes. And the other thing that's interesting, this is coming from the Venezuelan economist Carlota Perez, that the waves are also geographically located. So they move throughout the planet, beginning in England in the first wave with, the Industrial Revolution, and moving throughout the planet, throughout Europe, and then to America, and then to Asia. And so the book, okay, so it should be said that wave theory is not like standard economics. I don't know. I've asked some economists what they think of it. I don't think they're like totally dismissive, but they're also not totally like buy into it. And certainly, like, it then becomes very speculative, like where we are. Like Kondratiev and Schumpeter mapped a few out, I think up to the third wave. And then it's like, okay, well, where's the fourth wave? Where's the fifth wave? And again, in CCRU, we actually spent a lot of time trying to think, like, are the waves, this is like, I don't really want to talk a lot about accelerationism, but in my view, like the actually what acceleration is about is the idea that the waves are condensing. That's actually like what it's about. But in this book I stay to the 50-year cycle, and I try to like map something out, and it seems convincing to me that we are in the fifth wave, and the fourth wave, which was about digital computers, right? Like, so starting with the sort of inventions of cybernetics, etc., that happened during the war, and then that spreading throughout the globe, right? Until about the turn of the millennium. And then this fifth wave is really about this move into China as the main location of the most sort of intense, aspect of the wave. And that corresponds with the build out of 5G, right? Which was happening as I was writing the book, and became the subject, as you know, of like intense geopolitical friction, right, over the build out of 5G. So there's this convergence between 5G and the fifth wave, and China is really at the heart of it.
Thank you. Yeah, I guess these waves, I wonder, kind of go back. Do you think, I guess there's two ways I would see it about maybe the surge in the waves, the building of the wave. On the one hand, you wonder, is hyperstition part of it, where at least like the hyping up of certain technologies, et cetera, how the hype itself fuels the refinement and development of those technologies, a core aspect of that?
Yeah, I think that's a good question. And I think that has to be right? That, I think that if we try to understand where we are with AI right now, part of it has to be taking the hype curve into consideration, right? And so how does the hype shift the way in which this, because I think, like you say, like the issue of the wave is how the technology proliferates through the society. And I'm now in a program, I teach in a program called the Interactive Media Arts at NYU Shanghai. And this grew out of a program called ITP in New York. And one of the people who is like big in that program, and he came here and taught here for a while, is our colleague Clay Shirky, who he called the program, a program in the recently possible. So what we're interested in is technologies that, like, so we're not interested in technologies that are in the research lab, right? That's not what we do. We're interested in technologies as they proliferate out into the world, right? And what I tell my students exactly about that hype curve, like, I'm old enough to remember how this happened with video telephony. Like, I remember hearing about video telephony. I remember everyone going like that's Star Trek, it's stupid. No one would ever want to like see each other. I remember the whole hype curve, right? Like, you'd never want to see anyone on the phone. So I remember dreaming about it. I remember it coming. I remember it being dismissed. And then I remember when Skype came first, and it was just like suddenly it's everywhere for free, right? And now we're of course in the Zoom, right? So I think that process that happens really with every technology, where the technology and the society are hunting for a use. That's actually what's happening, right? Is super important to how technologies spread, for sure.
Yeah, that's really great. So so we're not professional academics. We're called what we call ourselves underground theorists. And I mean, basically we're doing philosophy in a way that's, you know, non-traditional or what, and we feel a certain bond with the CCRU because you guys we're not just going to do the typical thing here. Philosophy, you know, the maxim of make philosophy exciting, right? Like there's other ways to theorize, there's experimental ways to think. And so that's part of what we're doing. But it's funny, like, so I'm not a professional academic. I work in a warehouse with your typical working class blue collar guys. And yet it's funny, they sit around and they themselves now are concerned with stuff that you guys were theorizing and you're still like, they're like, oh, okay, artificial intelligence is here. Is it going to wipe all of us out? Is this the end of humanity? And so I'm sitting there, you know, as I was teaching CCRU, and now it's so real that your typical working class person who's uneducated is now has the concerns that CCRU had back in the 90s and, you know, on up. And so it's like you were all ahead of the curve on this, and now, you know, your average everyday worker is facing these whole things of, okay, is it going to wipe out everything human? What's it going to do? And so, you know, they're concerned now that everybody feels on this concrete level, even in a warehouse, that we're in this new wave, to talk in that terminology. And so everybody's in this looming sense of, is AI going to wipe out all our jobs? How are we going to have, how will we buy things? How will we, you know, all of this is a constant looming possibility to everybody now. And so when I see my, you know, my fellow coworkers, you know, bring this stuff up, it really validates the work all of you have been doing over the years, where it's really thinking through, where is this going, right? And what are the possibilities lurking on the horizon?
So I feel like I want to answer this in a, you know, philosophical way, which really does have to do with the nature of time, right? Like, so, you know, does an event happen in linear history, or does an event, you know, is there a way in which events occur on a more, let's say, flat notion of time? And so then they, you know, these events then ripple out both through the past and the future. And so, you know, I think that, like, what CCRU was about like sensing certain events, right? That kind of have always happened. You know, it's not like they happen at this time and then they're, you know, they just, in this other mode of thinking about time, you know, they're events that have always occurred, and then they play out through history, they manifest through history. So history is not the primary place, or in a way, or the primary temporality in which these things occur. And so when one, yeah, maybe it's like when one can grapple with something that seems really quite profound, it's because they have this capacity to get beyond the limits of the empirical moment that they're in. And in some ways, you know, maybe we could say, I'm just talking here, so I don't know if this is gonna hold up. But, you know, maybe we can say, like, even this thing that you're talking about, like this fear of your colleagues are feeling or whatever, right? That is a little bit like that, right? They're like sensing this thing, like, you know, there's nothing right on the horizon that is gonna like challenge their jobs, right? You know, but definitely something could happen, and it seems like it's happening, like we're inside an event, and it's sensing that, you know, causes, I think, both the excitement and the, yeah, I've been kind of interested in the last couple of days in this affect of awe and wonder, and trying to think about that as something that's kind of like, what is it that about, and how do you cultivate that. And I think it is about these things that are, you know, outside the limits of the empirical self playing itself out through history, right? Yeah.
Yeah, when I was reading what you had to say about waves, especially towards the beginning of the book, it got me thinking about this of like how, in this cyber positive way, how a potential, once it's there as a virtual potential, it has like a gravitational pull, like it's pulling itself into. I mean, the famous line, of course, from CCRU is that the techno capital singularity is out there in the noumenal future, building itself out of its, pulling itself into actualization. But behind that is this, and this is what I love so much about capitalism's transcendental time machine is you're the theorist who really, with this distinction you made via Deleuze and Guattari between eon and chronos, extensive actual temporality, and then this virtual intensive temporality, and that getting the ability to start to hone in on how these two temporalities rupture or collide, right? That's the core of what I was seeing with how you're talking about waves in some way. I was kind of seeing a connection there. And so, yeah, I'm fascinated with this unique cyber positive way that a virtual potential in the future can actually pull itself into actualization. As
Yeah.
sure.
Yeah, I'm really interested in the, like, as I say, this kind of, abstract materialism, or like way in which you can, this is maybe just how I like to do work or think, or, as you say, like I studied philosophy in school, and but I didn't want to just like, there's many great academic philosophers out there. So but I didn't want to just be doing like, in footnotes 75 of, I couldn't do that. So I'm very also just interested and engaged with the world, right? So I'm really like move back and forth between something that like, and I'm particularly interested in ideas about the future. So how do you think about those ideas as manifesting in the world, and how do you study the world? I also think, and I do tell my students about this, like that the world has a lot to teach us, right? So it's not like, I mean, you guys are say that you're not in the academic environment, but when you're in the academic environment, there's a tendency to say like, okay, here's my favorite theory. I'm going to go find it and impose it on the world. And I think that it's really important to like engage with the world and try to, so I'm just going to say something else from what I was reading yesterday. So one of the things I'm interested in now, this is post my book, is about thinking about this idea of nature and artifice. I'm interested in that lot, the thinking about art, like the nature of artifice, and so that has me doing some work on gardens, especially gardens from Asia, East Asian gardens. So I was reading this thing about Japanese gardens, and they have this idea of like following the request of a tree. Like if you think about a bonsai tree or something, right? How do you make a bonsai? So like this idea that you can engage with the world and try to listen to it in some way, right? To get at what is, yeah, as you say, virtual or abstract or philosophical. Yeah, that I am very drawn to that. I feel like I wanted to say something about China. Yeah, about the philosophers that, so the other thing about the book is that it engages with these Chinese philosophers. And I think that my motivation for writing it was to do with particularly my engagement with this philosopher Mo Zong San, who was working at the turn of the century. So this was a group of thinkers working in China at the turn of the century when techno-modernity first came to China, right? So they're grappling with, and in China, it's like very well known, as they call it, the century of humiliation, where they're losing wars, they're being overwhelmed by this technology that's coming in from elsewhere. And the whole sort of intellectual community in China is trying to like grapple with that in various ways, right? And there's a lot to say there, but I'm interested in these philosophers who do that and say, like, in order to, so some people say we have to like get rid of Chinese traditions, Chinese philosophies in order to like become westernized, and others say we have to get deeper into Chinese traditions in order to understand or in order to sort of deal with this technological modernity. And so it's through them that I think there's this kind of philosophical understanding of a ontological wave-like structure. And they also are very into this idea of that let's say the abstract, the philosophical, or what they call Buddha nature is manifest in the phenomenal world. So these ideas like are coming from them. And a lot of that is about trying to engage with China and its technological moment outside these like very negative discourses of like, it's a techno-authoritarian state, it's going to come and take our jobs, it's like whatever, right? This thing, which all those things might be true, but that's not the whole story. That's kind of what
I was actually going to ask about two things. One is related directly to China, maybe Shanghai or Beijing or both. Obviously for me, what's the difference? I've never been there yet. But I guess before I get to that one, I kind of want to back up just to the idea of media theory, and so, being based out of McLuhan, and then through him, Virilio and Baudrillard. I think one of the essential pieces that kind of comes from McLuhan is just the idea that, like, as you said, technology is not the same thing as the medium, right? And the medium is, as I understand it, it's mediating our sensory apparatus itself. And this fundamentally alters the way we experience, interpret, perceive, right? Experience the reality. And I'm wondering if this is this the way you're using the term media? And if so, then how does the wave actually, this fifth wave, how is it changing things for humans now at the level of experience that's just like so different?
Yeah. So yeah, that's, I think, exactly right? Like the McLuhan's like the medium is the message, is this idea that he talks about what matters is the electric light bulb, the electric environment itself is what matters, right? So in my book, I have these different waves, right? So there's the techno-capitalist wave I talked about, and the other waves that are the electromagnetic waves. So 5G, is this proliferation of high speed, high frequency waves so the idea is that we are in, we all sort of know this, right? That we are swimming, we are immersed in environment of waves that we cannot see, right? That when Hertz first discovered the waves, electromagnetic waves, he was like, they're there, they're completely mysterious, we don't know what they're for, right? And then of course there's the history of the radio and right? And then this kind of whole technological apparatus that has been built on radio waves, right? So the waves that are conditioning us are these electromagnetic waves. And I think what's important, is again, or what's part of what's interesting is that their speed, their frequencies are beyond human perception, right? So that what's the media environment that we're swimming in, right? So like our phones and our computers and our speakers and all this other equipment around us, like, I mean, I'm sure in a warehouse, there's all sorts of equipment that's like talking to itself, right? In a way that just is like beyond our perception, right? We don't know what's going on. This is happening. It's completely concrete. There's nothing metaphorical. It's happening, but we can't perceive it except through, as you say, some mediated tool. And that has just become like ever intensified by this, from 1G to 2G to 3G to 4G to 5G, like that's what we're doing. We're going like deeper and deeper. We're intensifying that electromagnetic wave-like environment. So that is the media, for me, that is the media environment, right? That I'm kind of most interested in. I'm interested in it, as I say, both because of the frequencies that it's occurring on, that it's like, and I think this is this thing, sort of come back to AI. I think this is for me, this is like the main issue with AI, is that it's time, its speed is just not our speed, So I just watched this film. I don't know if you've seen it. There's a film on AlphaGo, on the game that AlphaGo won against Lee Sedol. It's a really good documentary. I highly recommend it. And if you look at like a machine like AlphaGo, it's like, or now, and then later AlphaZero, it just played like every single master game of chess that's ever been played in like a couple hours, or not even 20 minutes or something, And then it became like the best chess player that ever was in, an hour or something. I don't know, they just made times, but it's something like that, right? So their speed and our speed are just not the same, And so I think that is like, I'm not sure if I'm answering your question, but that I think is the key aspect of that we're like living these temporal registers. I think this is maybe part of my interest now in gardens and plants, because plants live in a much slower register, right? And that's also, we can't perceive what they're doing because they're much slower than us. And I sort of starting to feel like we are to AI what plants are to us,
I like that. And then at some point, it'll be more like geological formations, right? Like that'll be the speed, right? So then the question about Shanghai and Beijing, and I'm sure, I don't know which one you live in, and I'm sure you're all over the place. But I'm curious about China, and just what you would tell a bunch of Americans who either haven't gotten out much or haven't gotten out onto that side of the world. What is it like to be on the actual frontier of the future? Like, and I'll just preface that by saying I work at an Amazon warehouse. The one I'm currently at is a lot less obviously automated than the last one. The last one was like 90% robots in this giant, warehouse. And, I'm writing about the future of work. I'm thinking about it. I'm sneaking my earbud to listen to audiobooks about the future and work and stuff like that. And it's kind of, there's this disjointed thing where you go back to reality outside of the warehouse, where just people are still living their lives like everything's normal. I mean, of course they get their Amazon packages every day. And but they're acclimated to that. And it's almost like a culture shock being in there and then going back out to the normal world. And of course, people are kind of getting worried about these things now, but they still are kind of like, oh yeah, but how much can really be automated? And I'm just like, everything in that I don't think there's any, except for, you need a couple people to walk around and double check on things. A couple people on hand, maybe. But even like one of the guys I talked to him, he was fixing one of the machines and we were talking about things, and he said it's a matter of time until I get replaced. But I was like, not you though, man, you chose the right path, because you'll always be needed. And he was like, no, I'll be replaced too. He was like, it's the guys a couple ranks up above me. They'll still be here. And I guess I'm just relating that to my own situation, so a little bit about it. But to say, like, in comparison, you're there, and then you travel around. What's it like? The difference, I guess, being there as opposed to other places in the world, and kind of what do we have to look forward to? I don't know. I don't know if it's something to look forward to or not, but.
I mean, okay, so first of all, I live in Shanghai. Shanghai is an amazing city. You should definitely all come. It's like really, I think the perception of it is, I feel like people that come will be quite blown away by it, in terms of it's just a very livable city with, great coffee shops and great restaurants, and it's quite beautiful, and so it's a wonderful place to live. In terms of this idea of Shanghai Future, so I wrote this book called Shanghai Future, but what that really was about was the idea that when I came to Shanghai, and particularly around the Shanghai Expo, which happened in 2010, there was a feeling in China, and especially maybe in Shanghai, that it would be the future. It felt it was, there's the moment in Shanghai in the 1920s where it was a very, that people call it like the Paris of the East. It was like it was very mythological kind of time. And there was a sense of this time, this great time in the city's history is returning, and Shanghai is going to like capture the future. And what struck me is, like, I had just come from England, where that idea was like, everyone would be totally cynical about that idea. I think maybe America has a different feeling, but in England it was like, that's ridiculous. You're not optimistic about the future. Like, that is not the vibe. And so I was very struck by that sense that the future is something that can be made, can be constructed, can be, I will say that has changed in Shanghai by the experience of COVID. So I think the sense in China about its own capacities to like a sort of optimistic sense of the future has been wildly tamed by the COVID experience. So who knows what the future will, the economy now is, so following this wave, like the economy now is in a downturn here, right? And people are also nervous about employment and all these kinds of things. So I guess, yeah, like the other thing to say about what you're saying is, like, I would say that in terms of like the delivery systems here, I think there's nothing, it's way beyond what is in North America, partly because labor is much cheaper, right? So people, like, it's super common for people to like, oh, I want a coffee, I'll just order it on my phone. I want to like, that there's like this kind of constant delivery structure. And one of the things that I'm interested in is actually to think about the city. And if you go around Shanghai, like a lot of the traffic is these delivery guys on bikes, right? And so like they're in a way the kind of media infrastructure of the city, right? Like you order something on the phone and they're what, right? And of course, eventually robots could do that, but I don't think we're anywhere close to that. It's like, I mean, I guess Amazon's experimented with these drone deliveries, but I think it's like quite far off, right? Uh, so yeah, I would say in China the worry is less, that physical labor is actually like less in threat than kind of low end white collar labor, like accounting systems, bureaucratic systems, all that kind of thing. That seems to be like more easily actually, and I think that this might be if we think about like what's next. And in here, I do think China has a really strong like capacities is that like robotics, like we've had this big jump in AI, but robotics is still like it's still really hard, I think, probably frankly, to do what you guys do with robots. It's not robots are good at like lifting things and pushing, but they have no dexterity. They have very little dexterity. They have, complicated movement is not easy. So it's very expensive to get a robot that does that kind of thing. So they can work on assembly lines. And so I think that in some ways, like the embodiment of AI, right? Like that is in some ways maybe what will power, like who knows, maybe it's something in electricity, maybe it's something in energy, but that is one of the places I think if we look towards like what's coming, it would be something like that.
I want to, well, I think we've got about 12, 15 more minutes left. And so I want maybe Mikey to get, I know he's got like a whole list of questions and maybe he'll get to ask another one before we close out. But Nance, I wanted to give you an opportunity here to get in with a question or a thought that has arisen in this conversation.
There's so much. I guess a thought that I had was just like these, I don't know, I'll call them noumena, kind of exist out there somewhere. And when we discover them, they become these technologies. And I guess we're just engaged in the struggle to maintain our privileged position of choice over what happens with these technologies. Rather than letting them to choose what happens to and with us. But I do want Mikey to keep going, so that's all I have to say.
Okay.
Yeah, I wonder though, like, so I think there's this question about how do we engage with the technological environment that we are, like, as we've been saying, right, that we are conditioned by, right? So I definitely don't think that we are a subject outside the media environment that gets to, we know that, right, from our experience with our phones, and like maybe we can do our very best to limit the time we're on our phone. I mean, like our capacities are extremely limited, right? But I do think that there's an element of choice about what types of engagements are possible. So like I'll give you an example of something I wrote about in the book, and it's like a little bit of a wild example, but now if people talk about 5G, like there was a lot of talk around COVID, right? And I think a lot of people still talk about like 5G is this, like there's conspiracies about it was somehow related to COVID and it was like poisonous, and there's kind of more talk about electrosensitivity and a kind of almost like allergy to those waves of those radiations and stuff. And I'm not, I don't know. It seems clear to me like these things are around us. We are in part electromagnetic. That some people would feel these things differently doesn't seem to me crazy. But in the 1980s in Shanghai and also earlier in the West, so in the 1980s in Shanghai, there was a kind of wave of what they called Qigong fever. So Qigong is like the exercises like Tai Chi, right? So your body is made up of Qi, and you do these exercises to like strengthen the Qi or make the Qi flow in various ways. And so there was kind of this thinking behind like, okay, this Qigong could connect with these electromagnetic waves. Like we could be kind of expanded as a body in relation to our to these energies, right? And in the 20s, there were radio artists who also tried to do that, like, oh, use my body as a conductor or something like that. So those are kind of wild examples, but I think that like this question about how can we engage with these technologies so that they are expanding, right? Rather than being in this like fear relation of like, I'm gonna just like try to like make my little cave and hide out in there for as long as I can. It seems to me like that is I'm more into that kind of, let's try to figure out how these can expand, like, one more example. I'm teaching a class on this idea of the nature and artifice, and we were talking about scientific instruments. So we were talking about like the Large Hadron Collider and the LIGO system that just sensed gravity waves, right? So like we as humans are building these like insane machines that are like picking up stuff going on in the cosmos billions of years ago. Like that is expansive, it's wondrous. So yeah, I think that just to say like, again, there's an attitude of like, which is super understandable, of fear and like, what's going to happen to my job? What's going to happen to my future? How am I going to live through this? And that kind of leads to this, I just want to protect what's here right now or whatever. I think that's a losing cause, right? Forget it. That's it. That's not happening, right? And it's much better to be like, how are we going to engage with the stuff in a way that is like, grows whatever it is that we want to grow, like our sense of, as I say now, I'm interested in our sense of wonder and, our knowledge, our understanding, our whatever it is, that we value.
Yeah, that's great. So I have two more questions. One's mine, and then I have one question. When we found out we were gonna have the chance to talk to you, some of my former students, I told them about the interview, and some of our other friends. And so the second question is basically I asked everybody, hey, if you could ask Anna a question, what would it be? And basically everybody gave me the same question. So there's one question from me, one from my students. Okay, so the first one is, in your new book, you talk about the occult materialism of electricity, and this was really interesting. And for me, and this is based on my interpretation of some CCRU stuff, but when I started to think about occult materialism, electricity, it actually got me thinking about the lemurs, at least in how I interpret what you guys were doing with it. But the way I understand it is, because anytime you get into the, people go, well, what's the ontological status of the lemurs? It's almost like Aleister Crowley and the status of the the holy guardian angel? Is it an interpsychic thing? Is it really transcendent outside substantial entities on their own? The way I understand it, I feel like the 45 lemurs are kind of personae that actually embody different types of intensities that the body can channel, which would be ultimately electromagnetic, but in a sense. But so KTAC, it's a persona, but ultimately it's a different waves of intensities that can channel the body and lead to deterritorializations of various types. At least that's how I kind of interpreted it. And so I'm curious if the lemurs and that stuff is part of how you're thinking about the occult materialism of electricity.
So it's been a long time since I thought about the ontological status of the lemurs. So I really appreciate that you're talking about that and thinking about that. I think like your description seems like a good one. I mean, again, I guess so I'm obviously just influenced by China and Chinese modes of thinking. So now I think I would think about it in terms of intensive qualities of time. So and this is like an idea that comes out of the I Ching. I don't know if you've ever played with the I Ching. So that there's a kind of let's call it quality of a particular time, right? That you can either be in tune or not in tune with. So that maybe is another way of thinking about what are the lemur, because I think the whole map is a time map, right? So another way of thinking about it would be something like that. But yeah, like I really appreciate that conversation is happening. I don't have like a definitive answer.
Well, and so here's the thing, to be honest. So the second question leads into everybody, but to be honest, they're asking about the lemurs and the numogram. Like that's everybody wants that question answered, because when you go into those writings, the pandemonium matrix, it's like what are we supposed to, how do we apply this, right? And so I don't know if you know, I want to show you this book. It's by somebody who goes by the name Vexus, and he's an occultist, and the whole book is him trying to think through how to apply the numogram, the lemurs, everything. So I don't know if you guys know how much influence you actually have on the occult, that you have occultists really trying to develop all of this out into practical, magic with a CK.
Yeah, I mean, I do think that the numogram is like one of these things where I think CCRU is right about this. It's just a discovery, right? It's just a discovery about how number works, and if you diagram numbers in a particular kind of way, this is what comes out. And so it's like, it's not in that sense like this. I think the CCRU was really good at getting at this line between invention and discovery, belief and like non-belief, right? And it's just, this is just something that arrives. Like and I think this is not something that is just true with that. It happens, right? That you just discover something that is kind of out there, right? And then like for us, what we used it for were these hyperstitional stories, right? But of course, like you can use it for whatever you're going to use it for. It's just a kind of map. It's just a map of a particular type of way in which numerical culture works. So yeah, I think that was it definitely was a kind of a discovery of some sort, and it definitely like powered the CCRU for a little while, and it was a interesting event, and I was very privileged to be part of.
Yeah, the question was exactly, ask Anna, how does one use the numogram?
Right. I don't know.
Ask Anna how she used the numogram
Yeah.
to the new book. And I'm like,
Yeah.
well, Anna did.
Yeah, I don't use it. I don't use it right now. Like, I think others use it more. So, and I probably should be using it, but yeah, yeah.
That's it. Like these occultists, like that's kind of their goal in writing these books. They're really trying to go, how do we actually use it? Like there's such a fixation on the lemurs and the numogram that you have a whole new generation.
That's awesome. Yeah, I think that it is very generative, right? It's a generative system and it can be used in all sorts of ways. And I think that there are certainly people who I know who, it's still like really generative and really speaking with them and, and all that sort of stuff. So
and one thing, syzygy and quinine, these were really important for you in that era. Like the syzygetic lemurs are more important than, at least, I guess that's the way I'm putting it. What is it about syzygy that was really inspirational for you as a concept?
Yeah. I mean, again, I think it was just this thing about like this clear pattern where these numbers or and then entities work together, and that so the way I understood the numogram, and I'm sure this is clear, is that that there's this central like we can even call spiral, right? That is empirical time. And that there's then these passages outside of time. And so the way in which this cycle or passage from one to another, that is history, that is right.
It's in Chronos, right? In your terms.
Exactly. Yeah. And then there's these other ways of mapping passages outside towards the outside, and they have different kind of qualities, right? So that's kind of how I would see it. Yeah, I guess that's interesting, right? Like how would I map the book onto that?
Yeah. Again, continues to, people are going to be talking about this and developing this for generations. It's not going anywhere. And so, it's cool to see how, there's so much fascination in that. And
I think this is about like systems that are really robust, right? If a system is really robust, then it has staying power, right? Like I think this is like, it's like when you watch a TV show and it's like got a great story and then you like, I feel like I don't know if you guys watched Lost, it was about like this where you kind of like, and then you realize like, oh, if you dig down, it falls apart. There's nothing there. Like the story actually doesn't exist, right? Where if the system at the core is like robust, it's like true. There's this, it's like then the thing has generative power, right? Because if you dig down, there's really something there. It's not like they're just making it up on the go. It's not like you just made up stories. It's the stories are based on something. And I think any of these systems, like the I Ching, right? Yeah, the tarot, right? These are systems that are robust. And so that's how come they're generative, right? So it's like the tarot, like you can have like millions of tarots of every sorts of tarot because the system underneath it is robust.
For me, the comparison I would use Lost as opposed to David Lynch's Twin Peaks, which is a story that just has such richness as it unfolds, and it's just layer after layer, and it keeps going, and me, and so I kind of feel like CCRU and Pandemonium Matrix is like the Twin Peaks of theory. But the last thing I'll say, just and ask you, you're in a unique position to answer this question, and this is something we're all interested in, again, like as underground theorists and what we're doing. Can you tell us, again, unique position you have where you've philosophized as part of a collective, which most philosophers haven't, and as an individual thinker in the more classical sense of the philosopher. Are there perks to being in a collective thinking? Are there certain aspects of being on your own, doing philosophy in the more individual way? What's it like, the difference between philosophizing in these two different modes?
I mean, I think like, for me, the legacy of CCRU is, as I said, it's like these ideas about time and about transcendental materialism, but the biggest legacy is about collective collaborations. I'm in all sorts of, I just think you think better with a crowd, right? So I'm in a lot of reading groups. I'm in a program here where I'm like trying to like work with people. I co-teach. I'm very much into, obviously there are people like whatever, Nietzsche or whatever, who sat on themselves and thought great things, right? I'm not one of them. I definitely think that collective collaborative thinking is a lot better than trying to do it all on your own. And I really recommend, like, reading groups are highly recommended for people. I'm in a reading group with my brother and also people that like are not academics, and we just meet every week and we just like read out loud from a book, and just talk about it as we go, and it's like tons of fun. And so I highly recommend that activity.
We're really into we love the reading aloud thing. And it's funny because that used to be how it was done, right? That's
yeah. It's a great way. My father taught me that method and I totally love it. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I would love to have you back someday to talk about the I Ching, especially because my work with time energy, it really, I'm always trying to think about qualities of time and obviously energy. And it seems like, I guess the I Ching has always just been interesting. It's like, oh, that's interesting. No one ever told me, oh, it's about the intensive qualities of time. Sign me up. I guess I have to learn Chinese. I'm on my way. I'll be there soon, But with that,
I just engaging with it. That's a good translation.
Which one?
The Willem translation. I'll send you the translation to get. Yeah.
That would be amazing. Thank you. And with that, I'd just like to say thank you so much for coming. It was an absolute honor and a joy to have you here.
Pleasure.
Thank you so much.
You guys. Take it easy.
All right. Take care.
Thinking is super uncool, and that's why you should do it. It's just like almost anything that's like cool anymore. It just sucks. And I think that's like what the underground movement has always been about, is just like seeing what's in the mainstream, being like it ain't there, and kind of like cobbling something together, and it's a little mismatched, but that's like its beauty.
We cannot do direct revolution, but the only way to lay the foundation for it is to do what you are doing to move the underground. It's a theoretically correct title.
Welcome to Theory Underground, where workers with earbuds can find genuine liberation from necessity.
Research at Theory Underground focuses on what is most important for understanding our current situation: theory of the subject, capital, time-energy theory, critical media theory, CMT, and the most essential critiques necessary for understanding why the theory, ideology, and common sense of influencers left to right misses the mark.
We bring primary texts from leading lights of diverse fields to bear on topical issues and works popular in our current world. Theory Underground is a publishing house as well as lecture course and social media platform.
You've been reading Underground Theory.
Yes.
And
amazing book. I'm a publisher and an editor. I run a review of books. Literally, it's my living. This is the best edited collection I've ever read.
Jesus Christ.
Seriously.
This is a little experiment in what I, David McCarricker, can pull off without relying on the academy or the algorithmic dictates of the attention economy.
Usually a good edited collection has good essays, but you only want to read a few. Every essay makes me want to read the other essays because you have a vision. Everyone that you invited for a reason. You weren't some fake publicist who's like, how's so-and-so's a new book, have them on your show. No, you only talk to people because you've read shit by them, that you've thought about, that you think has value, even if you disagree. So I think that's what's amazing.
I believe that I am, like so many others, pioneering a future in which educators can form learning webs that will make learning as a way of life enjoyable and emancipatory. However, before these tools become accessible, they have to be experimented with. That's why I built my own website and app using nothing more than my own saved wages, 5 patrons, and some small classes of students over the last year. Of course, I also have had my wife Anne's moral support and help with accounting so that I don't get in trouble with the IRS or whatever. In less than a year, Theory Underground has already put out 8 courses, 2 books, one, my book, Time Energy, and the other, Underground Theory, which has over 30 contributors, including works written by students at Theory Underground, some of my fellow travelers, and colleagues in the broader universe of Underground Theory. Beyond the books and courses, though, you will also find interviews, reading exegetical reaction sessions, and live weekly events for working class autodidacts, independent researchers, and renegade academics. These include a variety of clubs and cohorts that meet on a weekly or monthly basis. If you want to get involved, there are 4 main subscription levels.
Think of it like a gym membership, but for your mind.
The point is to make learning, practice, and theoretical comprehension a way of life. Support at this stage of the operation is more crucial than ever because my savings were used up over the last year of getting this established. If I can triple my subscribers in the next 2 months, I can quit my gig at Amazon and focus on this work full time. All I need is a few more people at each of the levels or a couple big time patrons who just want to see it happen. Right now I am doing a patron and site subscriber drive, so excuse the commercial. But if you end up really liking what goes on at this channel, consider signing up soon. If you cannot afford it, but want to get involved with some of the stuff behind the paywall, I have made a financial aid scholarship you can sign up for here in the description. Quick side note, some people ask about the profit motive. At this point, I have not actually made a return on any of my investment in terms of the amount of time, energy that I put into things, the amount of savings I've actually put into things, the opportunity cost of the work that I'm doing as opposed to the other kinds of things that I could be doing for money. But more importantly, I don't actually make enough to pay for my cost of living. The goal is to make enough for my cost of living, and then once that is achieved, everything over that amount is going to go towards expanding the operation to the point where I can hire Michael Downs, aka Mikey of The Dangerous Maybe, to be a full-time researcher and part-time teacher at Theory Underground. All right, so with that aside, I just want to say also, if you are a worker with earbuds, what's up? I see you. I work at Amazon part-time and everything I do is for my past self who used to work there full-time. Most workers with earbuds couldn't care less about theory, but I do believe a working class intellectual revolution could grow out of the underground theory scene. My hope is that what I have built here will contribute to making the scene something more than just a scene, and you into something more than just a scene kid. We're trying to make this into a real intellectual milieu capable of leading a way forward beyond the imminent crises facing humanity. But for that, we need thinking now more than ever.
Start thinking.
I hope that you either will or have enjoyed the program, and also make sure to like, comment, subscribe, and leave this playing in the background all the time while you're doing other things.
Playing long-form Theory Underground content in the background while you do things has, in the near future, been scientifically proven to emancipate minds from the functional illiteracy imposed on workers by the structural stultification of time energy. This is achieved by reterritorializing circumspective concern.
Also, to some degree, it is for the algorithm.
emotion, but for your mind.
I love you so much.
I love you too.